Oh boy, and we're live. We are not a drama channel, no matter what. Oh, we are not a drama channel. Okay, so this is the Digital Archipelago. Finally, episode 47?
47, I think, yeah.
Yeah, 47.
Yes, because it's 47, because it's 48 on the playlist, because I added the Conscious Caracal stream to the Digital Archipelago playlist.
Because that was basically just Digital Archipelago with
bonus episode.
Yeah, bonus episode. We didn't get to cover. Well, I mean, next week we'll probably cover Kaczynski and. Although I don't know,
everyone and their mother has covered Kaczynski. Like my notifications.
People are getting hit on YouTube by covering it. So maybe not. We might have to do a paywalled version of that. But we have other things to cover next week. But this week, I mean, I don't want to say like thankfully another he's literally me historical figure has died, but I'm not going to say that. But anyways,
you're not going to say that about the late Daniel Ellsberg, leaker of the Pentagon Papers, who died at the age of 90-something today?
Well, that was Kissinger's final revenge to live past his death.
Kissinger's tweeting "Press S to spit" on his alt account right now. Clemens von Metternich Groiper is saying "Press S to spit" for Daniel Ellsberg's death.
Well, that's my Steam account. It's literally Metternich. And I had to pay Henry Kissinger for the handle.
Oh my god. That's amazing. What does Henry Kissinger play on Steam? He plays like Hoi 4, right?
Oh, he's got the new the TNO mod for Hearts of Iron 4, or the Reich 1.
He actually did. Henry Kissinger is actually the guy who did that mod everyone plays, where you play the Second Civil War. Tim.
Whoa.
Yeah, he was a consulting historian on that fact. He's also worked very closely with Sid Meier on the Civilization games. He understands. Everyone thinks that, if you've ever played Civilization, you know of the famous glitch where Mahatma Gandhi, the alleged peace lover, not pedo weird guy. Everyone finds it. Oh, it's a glitch that he's so nuke happy. No. Kissinger was the consulting advisor. He told Sid Meier and the guys over there and Microprose and Firaxis that no, actually, the Indians are trigger happy with their nuclear weapons. If it wasn't for his secret interventions in the 1990s, India and Pakistan would have turned each other to glass. So he's a very important consultant on the 4X grand strategy video game genre. And that's the only reason why they're keeping him alive, is to pump out more video games, not to keep the world order he built alive.
Didn't Norman Finkelstein write a book about Gandhi saying, like, near the end of his life in those pamphlets, Gandhi, like, renounced nonviolence?
I don't know, actually, but I
think so.
My gut instinct wants me to say that that's true.
Actually, what's funny is that I was interviewed by an editor of Norman Finkelstein, and he's like, Gio, I could hook you up if you want to do a Content Minded with him, because he wrote a recent book about the Wokesters or whatever. And can you imagine Content Minded with Norman Finkelstein? That'd be amazing. I mean, of course, I would have to paywall discussion of his famous book. The one. Anyways, we brought on Christopher Sandbatch because I was told by people that you are the foremost expert on all things Cormac McCarthy. Cormac McCarthy recently passed away at the age of, I want to say 86 or 87. And please leave those super chats.
89. See, that's what, world's foremost expert. It qualifies me to tell you how old he was. I am not the world's foremost expert. And the reason I'm going to deny myself the title here is because I don't know if either of y'all follow him, but he goes on the Art of Dark podcast pretty frequently. Aaron Gwynn is, personally, I think he's the foremost expert of his generation, at least. And I think he's a little bit older than me. I think he's like 10 years older than me. So safely, I can rest easily knowing that my time is coming. By giving him the title for now. He's also probably I think the foremost expert in Southern literature, and he's specifically a Cormac McCarthy nut. Has Blood Meridian. He's got an entire Substack themed around just reading Blood Meridian. So I want to plug him instantly. He's also a great Twitter account to follow.
I think I follow him.
Yeah. I'm not the world's foremost expert on Cormac McCarthy, but I may be the world's most similar. I may be, of all the he's just like me bros, I may be the most he's just like me bro of the Cormac McCarthy bros.
And well, I mean, both of you are Southerners. Cormac McCarthy's a Southerner, right? So,
well, I mean, that's an interesting question here. First, he's from an Irish Catholic family.
Right.
He's from an Irish Catholic. He's born in Rhode Island to an Irish Catholic family. So, I mean, there's some things about him that are really fascinating because he certainly writes a lot of what you would term Southern fiction. Okay.
Right.
And especially even Blood Meridian has like strong, Southern fiction, specifically overtones. And I would say Cormac McCarthy is a Southerner. That's, for instance, why Santa Fe and not San Francisco. Because, like, there are some things about McCarthy's life that, and he's so postmodern, so self-stylized that you have to kind of know that he knows that this is what he's doing. But he kind of navigates, he's born in Rhode Island in 1932. Now, I'm going to say his family is not wealthy or anything, but they're not poor. Okay, his father's a lawyer, but it's the beginning of the Great Depression, and he's not in Rhode Island very long because his father gets a job as an attorney working for the Tennessee Valley Authority. Of course, it's one of the big New Deal programs, and so family moves down to Knoxville, Tennessee, to Knoxville area, and that's really where he grew up. But there are some things about Cormac McCarthy that are sort of irrevocably Yankee. Okay, even there's considerably more things about Cormac McCarthy that are more Yankee than they are either Southern or Western.
And for those Americans, for people outside of America who don't know the difference, what is the difference between like Yankee? Like it doesn't just mean like Northern America. It just means that like Northern states. I mean, Yankee has a different connotation.
Yeah, I don't even really mean Midwest. Whenever I'm talking like we're talking about like that account logo Daedalus, bring him up. Use Shadow crosses the sun or whatever. But logo will refer to himself sometimes as a swamp Yankee, and that's really the milieu that McCarthy's family sort of comes from, which is like Yankees very specifically come from the area that you would call like New England. Really only a couple of counties deep in New England too, and then
like Bushes, Kellybomport, Maine.
Yeah, if you imagine like Boston as a city-state, and its like northernmost outpost is like Kennebunkport in Maine.
Oh yeah,
that's pretty much the range of Yankees. And then of course the South is the South could be dozens of different things depending on who you ask. But
yeah.
But I think the thing that like makes him so universal, because again, Cormac McCarthy's definitely some Southern writer, but he's been able to do some things. Southern fiction in the last 20 years or so, in the last 50 years or so, has kind of sunk into what you would term genre fiction.
Yeah, like Southern Gothic is definitely, yeah.
Right, exactly. So like, when I say this, you can imagine like the names, the titles in your head. Where the Crawdads Sing, Beast of the Southern Wild, so on and so forth. That sort of thing. It's got a very like, sort of self-referential, stylized, fashion. And Cormac McCarthy, he's a little more, he's able to universalize what he's writing a little bit more. And I really shouldn't say universalize. I should say universalize within America.
Yes.
The themes that he deals with, because I was talking. I have friend. Our buddy Kira. He's in your chat. He floats around. I was talking with him the other day about this. It's like he's like, and he talks like a rich, arrogant slob. And so he's like, I don't understand this thing. But he's like, I read Blood Meridian. I don't understand this thing with Cormac McCarthy. I just don't get it. It's like, well, he's very ubiquitous in the United States. And one of the reasons I think this is true is because he's able to unify a lot of the themes that we sort of think of when we think of New England fiction as, the New England literary tradition. And he sort of sneakily blends it into what is otherwise self-consciously Faulkner memetics,
Right.
And that I think that's the secret sauce that like really managed to make him. And of course, he got his shot in the press and everything. But that was why he stuck instead of just ended up being famed for 15 minutes whenever he wrote one book, because like he really did. He tapped into something that was really universally American. He was able to speak volumes to almost every American man, certainly, and without a doubt, every white American man. Like if you're a white American man and you read Blood Meridian and you weren't moved by it, what the hell is wrong with you? But that was a lot of talking around.
Well, I wanted to talk about the culture war issues around Cormac McCarthy just a little bit, because I want to get into Blood Meridian and The Road. But I do like one thing particular that when we discuss Blood Meridian would be the frontier thesis is everywhere. I mean, that's the quintessential American, but it's spiritualized in Cormac McCarthy, which most, I guess, I mean, I'm no expert, obviously, but I think a lot of like Southern Gothic fiction, there is a metaphysical element to that quintessential American frontiersman ideal or monotype, or let's call it econotype, right? I mean, unfortunately, I think it's very unfortunate that Spangler didn't write a lot about America. I think if he went to America, if he lived long enough, he probably could have detected, I mean, Springer Accolade came on the podcast recently on Content Minded L release episode. But before that, Prude, what do you have to? Should we get the shilling out of the way? You were on Warren McIntyre today. I watched most of it about this article you were breaking down from some very revealing leftoid. Who was it by?
Oh, some last name Moskowitz or whatever, and he'll pop back in a second, folks.
Yeah.
But he was a therapist, which I just thought was just totally fitting that some psychologizing maniac wants to kill all the guys that live in the suburbs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, to point off on your aspect of frontierism, I mean, like there's Southern Gothic. Well,
you're a Texaner, so you know this intimately.
Well, to an extent, but I mean, like you have to understand, like Cormac McCarthy gets a start in 1965, where he writes The Orchard Keeper, and of course,
he was piss broke, right?
Yeah. Well, yes, and that's the story. Well, we can get into that. That's definitely an interesting story because the man had an interesting relationship with the fairer sex, to say the least. But yeah, so he writes this this novel, which he quote unquote submits blindly to who would be his editor for like the next 40 years, and comes out in 1965. The year after he wins the 1966 William Faulkner Award for first notable novel, I think was the
Holy
award.
Crap.
But I mean, his style, if you read this book, which is interwar period, tiny isolated community in Tennessee. He's literally writing from home. He's writing about home. He's writing about his life and this time of his upbringing. And of course, about bootleggers, which of course, so I've read bits and pieces of it. My reading of Cormac McCarthy is Blood Meridian, The Road, All the Pretty Horses, and I'm currently reading The Passenger. So
even like Faulkner, that theme is like replete with that kind of content, especially like in As I Lay Dying. I'm not going to say I only know about the book because of the band As I Lay Dying. I was never into As I Lay. Are you a fan of Christian metalcore back in the 2000s, Prude? Or
no.
Do you know about Tim Lebesis, Prude?
No, I can safely say I don't, and I'm
you
afraid
don't
if I open that can of worms, I'm not ready. But I mean.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
So I mean, like the aspect of like frontierism is present, not just in like the Southern Gothic stuff. That was far more self-referential. It's far more personable. Like if you are from there, you're gonna relate to it, and even if you aren't from there, you're gonna relate to it. I mean,
well, that's what I mean. Like when you like a lot of Southern Gothic writers, you would almost consider them folk literature, folk art in a way, and they were brought to the mainstream later. I don't know if that's true or not nowadays. I mean, there's that debate around like folk literature and folk art, whether it's like genuine or anyways.
Well, I mean, it's a little different than. I mean, the other thing too is like what remnants of this tradition is alive. I mean, McCarthy, of course, is heavily influenced by William Faulkner. Faulkner, of course, is seeing a generational style happen. I mean, especially when his early writing begins in like the 1920s. I think he's in New Orleans at the time. He's living in the French Quarter. He's similar in his writings with respects to like Hemingway and Fitzgerald. So you're sort of seeing this like turn of the century style from a uniquely Southern perspective sort of survive, especially in McCarthy. But I mean, like, it's different than, say, Westerns. And I mean, we talked about this when we were on Conscious Caracol's channel about the with respects to like the South or like the frontier. It's just like, the American West gets conquered and you're kind of left to wonder, well, what does that mean? Or what do we do now? Like, it's the great American adventure, which, prior to a lot of our demographic changes, right? Like, that was the American story. I mean, like, the American ethnogenesis, you could argue, really gets started, for instance, in like King Philip's War. And we've talked about that on the old Glory Club with Sandbatch. And what comes in from there is, the frontier is a continuation of that. You kind of see the veracity and ferociousness and the sheer blood and guts of it all in Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. But he's also sort of, I don't want to say like he's deconstructing it, but he is posing these beautiful character portraits of what it meant to be these men out here. And I mean, for instance, everyone sort of references Judge Holden, but I mean, like, you talk about the aspect, he speaks Dutch, and everything with respects to like this sort of bizarre interpretation of Christianity and mixed Dutch reform, portraiture, race, destruction. What are we doing? And it's far different than, say, opening up a Louis L'Amour novel or any other sort of pulp Western classic, because it's not so much about. Because I mean, you read a Louis L'Amour character, yeah, you got your outlaw, you got your story, you had it going, and I grew up on a lot of those with my dad because he reads them. It's really the only books he reads, but it's the West is just as much of a character as the characters in that story, whereas what McCarthy and other Southern Gothic writers can do is even with something like Where the Crawdads Sing or whatever, like, the region is just as much of its own organic character that is shaped as the people shape the region. It kind of reminds me of like Spangler's concept of the hand and the tool. Man's hands evolve with the tools, and the tools evolve with the hands. Sort of this.
Well, another thing that Heidegger got from Spangler.
Yeah, right. And so you kind of see that sort of duality play out with the Southern writers, especially with McCarthy.
Have you ever heard
just
of
on the Spangler thing real quick? I don't know. Have any of the right wing bros, have they dug up the Spangler references in Stella Maris? This is something. So when you talk, whenever you can, I would be skeptical about applying, any sort of Spanglerian language to a writer's work, except in this case because he's obviously read Spangler, and really incorporated him in quite a number of ways. There are a lot of sort of baseline assumptions that you could really see him in a way drawing from Spangler, and this is one of the things that's really interesting for me about McCarthy. Well, anyway, it's towards the end of Stella Maris, which of course is the last book we get from him. Of course, when you're reading this book, if you're a real McCarthy fan, as you're thundering down the last stretch of this book that's really kind of this coda to this other novel that he's written, which was The Passenger, there's this section where he takes of the last 50 pages of this incredible writer's life, he takes a moment to meditate on Oswald Spengler directly and what he thinks is interesting about Oswald Spengler. Okay, and really, what it turns out, he's interested in that second chapter that's called The Meaning of Numbers, and this is the one. But there are other Spenglerian themes that run all the way through Cormac McCarthy's work. I'm sure a lot of other people really have borne down on this already, though. I'm sure people are familiar with it. But you're absolutely in the right frame of mind whenever if you're talking about Spangler, you're talking about Cormac McCarthy.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, but even like I don't know if he's a bit of a lib or not, but definitely like that book. What's a book by Slotkin, Gunfighter Nation, that talks about like specifically the frontier thesis. I mean, there is like a lot of Spenglerian themes within the corpus of Blood Meridian, but also I would say a lot of that American the quintessentially American literature. Like there's just something about the sort of spiritual ground of the United States that leads to very particular man versus nature, man confronting the frontier, confronting forces outside of what is known. There's something about America, like I've said before in this podcast, that's eternally old and eternally young at the same time. And
okay,
yeah.
whole frontier thesis, like you're referring formally to the frontier, and good God, I cannot remember the name. Frederick Jackson Turner. Now got it. Yeah.
Turner, Turner.
Frederick Jackson Turner is the guy. He writes this. He's a historian of the same generation, actually, as my favorite American historian ever, Woodrow Wilson, and a couple of these other guys. But also, he's writing at the same time Henry Adams is writing, and Brooks Adams. And this is really the peak of cyclical history, as like a cyclical history as a concept in the philosophy of history. And the frontier thesis is absolutely, you have to kind of squint and chop and screw it a little bit, but the frontier thesis is absolutely a manifestation of cyclical historical theory. So like this is a theory of history, which this main era, capital M, capital E era, main era, that is the era of the frontier, the American West, this thing on which the United States of America has always based itself. Okay, this is like famous things that happened in American history because of the frontier. Benjamin Franklin makes a population prediction in the late 17th century based on how he thinks the frontier is going to be settled. People laugh at him. He's like 100 million in 100 years, or some number like that, and people are like,
he was more or less correct, was he not?
Yeah, and he was within a couple of thousand. Okay, but this this thing, America has always, and America has used that frontier as a crutch. For a lot of its past, it was able relatively to plaster over the sort of class divisions. It's repeatedly been able to escape what it will refer to as the traps of European politics by simply, so if even with the slavery question, it's like, okay, well, if you people want to have slaves in these states, go settle another state west from Texas, go New Mexico, or go west from Mississippi, go to Louisiana. And if you don't want slaves, you just keep going from Iowa to Colorado to California, so on. So just keep, just straight line west, big huge line in the earth. That's when we use that to really avoid a lot of the political issues that Europe has. This is Nick Land's concept of exit. And and in a very real, this is it's cracker factory politics. And then in 1892, we get this frontiers closed, and the assumption at the time is that this closes a main era of American history. What is America now? Somebody's jammed the clutch in. What is this next gear going to be? What is the next phase of American civilization look like? And that is all over Blood Meridian. And that's just the thing about McCarthy that fascinates me the most, is his take on history. And this is where he turns into an incredible Southern writer, because the meaning of time, history, the weight of history, these are very Southern literary things. And this is our bread and butter, along with like incestuous romance.
Yeah. The closing of the frontier, this is before the Civil War, right? I'm assuming?
No, it's after the Civil War. It's 1892.
Oh, okay. That does make sense. That does, in a lot of maybe we'll cover. But Prude, you go ahead. The land connection, that's very, man, but then Nick Land being like British, it's, well, I mean, he really is a citizen of the world now. But go ahead, Prude.
I mean, yeah, Dr. Land is what you would call as the citizen of the world, to say the least.
What Land, the point Land is, he's making points about the politics of the Anglosphere, and this is, we're maybe getting too far off into Sandbatchisms now, but
that's why we're here.
He's essentially alleging that there are certain and really, this is not a land thing. This is a lot of historians have done this. Reinhard
Yeah.
Koselleck does this. Jürgen Habermas does it famously in structural transformation. Structural transformation. He's got this whole chapter called
that's right. Yeah. Go
The
ahead.
Model Case of Britain. There's an incredible Bernard Potter, I think is the name. He's a Marxist historian. He wrote this book called The Absent-Minded Imperialist, where he's a Marxist historian who takes this claim that who's the Rivers of Blood guy?
Powell.
Enoch Powell.
Yeah, Enoch Powell. So he takes this claim that Enoch Powell once made, Enoch Powell once claimed the British Empire never existed. It was just goodwill in the free market, okay? And he takes this claim seriously, and he writes this history of British imperialism as this thing that's totally different from all of the other imperialisms, except I would argue that Russia's is remarkably similar to Britain's, actually. But the whole point that's being made here is that this thing the Anglosphere does, they're constantly able to plaster over ideological differences that that arrive in countries like France or Germany,
right,
where everybody's really kind of stuck together. When people in the Anglosphere, however, when their politics get so bad that they're going to start killing each other, one of them just like, look, Australia's that way, go there, okay, and then they go to Australia, and it's like the valve. It's like a safety valve you can pull.
Go to Canada. What are you doing?
Yeah. Go to Canada. Yeah.
Canada was really a punishment division for
Like what are the countries that have a frontier tradition? It's the United States, Canada,
Australia,
New Zealand, South Africa, all of them. All of them, and then Russia.
Russia could be in there as well. It's very funny how the Anglos have this intense hatred, especially nowadays, for the Russians, but yet they were kind of like kissing cousins for a little bit that hated each other. But that's history. Anyways, that's distracting. This is why me and you have to talk. I think a cut to mine, but Prude, Blood Meridian. Do we want to cover Blood Meridian first, or should we go to the road? We'll save the road for after.
I mean, he's got to be the first one. First one, his early books aren't good, so there's not whatever. So go ahead. Blood Meridian's the first one that really dings the radar in a way that, that you really need to talk about.
Yeah, Philip Daniel had a good point about Vietnam and the French, but anyways, go ahead, Prude. Yeah.
Well, it's. What did he say about the French? I don't have chat open.
That they had a frontier. Here you go. There you go.
Yeah, I mean they do. And then that frontier tradition gets settled, and then post-colonialism kicks in, and America doesn't really do anything about French Indochina, although we kind of come in later under domino theory. But that's actually a way more long, complicated story, because we got in there even still when the French were involved under Eisenhower. Like our America's involvement in Vietnam is way older than I think most people realize contemporarily, but that's a subject for another day.
Watch Apocalypse Now, the Redo edition, the Redux edition.
Yeah.
So
I guess I want to talk about Blood Meridian in the aspect of actually the beginning, because we have the kid, which I would argue is a self-insert for obvious reasons, just because of where he's from, but. We meet Judge Holden at a religious revival in Nacogdoches, Texas. And if you've ever lived in sort of Nacogdoches area, East Texas, North Texas, parts of sort of that like Texian Anglo-West, or founders of Texas, the Republic, this is way more common than you think, to a point that in 2023, on the road that I take on my way to my church, there was, over the course of the last 6 months, a revivalist tent church led by this sort of... No, I mean, it's very real.
They still have tents?
This is a common tradition. This is not new, and it is not going away either. And this pastor is got his little billboard, he's got his little signs, and he was saying things like, a church where all lives matter and where you can come and uniquely engage and encounter Christ. And I had gone out of pure curiosity. I was driving home from one of my services, and I was like, I've never been to one of these. I kind of want to know what it's like. And so I popped in my head in the tent. Thankfully it was crowded. No one kind of noticed. And I'm just listening to this guy sort of cite scripture squirrely and explain the need for a return to a more fundamental Christian biblical tradition. And it's just a fiery, 45-minute sermon, and they got like a little fire outside for in case it gets cold and people want to socialize or talk to the pastor and take a picture with him. And but he's just going off, and he's talking about the need to come back, the need to return like the prodigal son. And it's just like, yeah, this is no different than sort of the opening chapters of Blood Meridian, lest Judge Holden accuses the man of sodomizing children and sacrificing animals. But, no one killed this traveling evangelical like pastor that I sat in and listened to. It was very strange, very interesting. But you wanted to say something there, Sandbatch, just about this tradition? Because, I mean, like, it's still around.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's what I was going to point out, because I forget that you and I live like really, both of us live well within the world that Cormac McCarthy's writing about, like Nacogdoches, Texas. If you have to have been to Nacogdoches, Texas, to imagine what it's like. And the Blood Meridian, we get the incredible first line, "See the child," and you gotta if you know this world, you gotta kind of hear it like that. You gotta know there's a specific emphasis in the way people in this part of the world talk. And yeah, I mean, thinking like tent cities. We're really talking like first season of True Detective is the only other so perfect representation.
That is the closest thing that you
imagine.
get.
Yeah. But I mean, it's incredible that this thing is still real. And this is one of the things that's different about Southern fiction. It's one thing that differentiates American fiction from Southern fiction, or makes Southern fiction separate from American fiction, is it is in no way, shape, or form oriented towards New York City, Chicago, or Los Angeles. Like this is it's like oriented towards New Orleans, Richmond, and Mexico City, or something like that. Those look like those are the locational poles, and that's the cultural matrix you're working in. And man, at Blood Meridian, maybe I can only think of maybe 2 or 3 other novels that are really as good as like lay the texture of this part of the world, down so perfectly.
But why is it? I noticed that like the fascination among the E-Right with Cormac McCarthy has grown, and I know he got like as soon as he died, you have the usual like hit pieces of like he mistreated his wife, and he like young white men, like sensitive young men read him. And so I saw this Talia Lavin tweet about why he was dangerous or whatever. And of course, like she hates him because sensitive young men read Cormac McCarthy. And so I wonder, like,
wait, this is a thing. There's been hit pieces.
Yes, there has. That
There's a hit piece after any major writer or celebrity.
Wait, bring me up to speed on this. I was going to say, because this is one of the things that I had to say, was that, in terms of like press reaction, I've actually been kind of, first time in my life, I've been sort of proud of the way it's like, Kaufman from Art of Dark, he said, somebody asked like the other day, they were like, when day he died, there's like, well, I don't know, there's a Danish guy. He was like, well, Cormac McCarthy, he's a writer. And Kaufman said, depending on how you look at this sort of thing, Cormac McCarthy may have been the greatest living American, especially if you think about it in terms of like relative to the next closest like competitor in his specific craft. He was certainly probably the greatest. But I've not seen much negative. In fact, the only complaint that I've had is that like a literary establishment that really hated him most of his career, and that he didn't like them at all. That they've actually been kind of, like cautiously celebratory, and I didn't expect that. I was expecting to see hit pieces, and I haven't. So they are out there.
Why did they hit him so? I know he refused to give interviews, the literary establishment, but also like I guess nowadays they're framing him as like dude bro literature. I mean, Prude, you've seen more than me. I just saw the Talia Lavin tweets, and I saw the one of the tweet about his wife or whatever, how he was poor. You go ahead.
I mean, the few hit pieces I've seen have been in relationship to his wife or his ex-wife, and there's some crazy stories about that as well. His like conscious decision about poverty. Why don't you just give a talk and do that, make some money, and he opted not to. And again, these are stories from his wife or ex-wife, so I mean, it's not like these are anything new. But I mean, there are some pieces that I think are just a little overtly political that you're probably going to run in the mill and see. But I mean, most people, I think, thank God, outside of just a few pieces, have been primarily lionizing him. And I'd like to keep it that way.
In a sense, I'm glad that we did this 3 days later, because there's some things. First of all, like when the moment he died, I mean, we were talking about that in the Old Glory chat or whatever. It's like, and I was like the really clever, the really big magazines like Atlantic and New York Times, group, places like that, they had this obituary written already. Okay, they just be like, because that's the way they work. It's the way big newsrooms work. There's like on like really time sensitive issues that they know they're going to have to cover something. There is a pre-written obituary of Cormac McCarthy that is periodically updated. Oh, yeah. It's kind of like what the British do for the Queen. Did for the Queens. Like that was all ready to go. But all the heavy hitters pretty much have gone, and like they've shot their shot. And the only one that I saw that really took a swipe at him was New York Times, and they called him a dark. And arguably this wasn't, because there are people that think of Cormac. There are even people that positively think of Cormac McCarthy as like a positive or a stark nihilist, or like exposing the dark side of America, or something like that. I don't really think that's true. I think it's a bad reading of him, but it's a common enough reading of him that you can't really complain that New York Times goes with this.
Yeah.
But I've been really. I was like, wow, like the New Yorker. And this is a guy that, I mean, literally, he was our guy. Okay, like that's not like even a joke. I'm not like, I don't have to couch that in strange punctuation or anything like that. This dude is our dude. Okay, it's like, and up until a couple of days ago, there were a couple of people whose living presence on the planet sort of assured me that like someone somewhere that people listen to thinks about things almost the same way I do. That was it was comforting. He's gone now.
Man.
I would have expected a lot more dancing on his grave. I thought it was very interesting that there hasn't been a lot of it. But I guess Talia Levin, of course, this is the direction she's got to go. I mean,
yeah, of course. But how is he our guy? Like, I mean, apart from the themes and sort of like the celebration of the very like violent, almost Faustian masculinity, was he personally based? Like, did he have based opinions? I mean, did he vote for Trump? I mean, how was he our guy?
He said he doesn't think poets should vote. So like, I mean, there almost no politics here whatsoever. Though, I mean, in fact, he does very sneaky things, especially in his later fiction, that like lets you know he's following politics, but maybe not necessarily following them too closely,
right?
Or maybe not necessarily entertained by them. Because he does this, he has this in The Passenger. He's got this character that's a transgender. Okay, but this transgender is this over the top feminine thing that they're in this restaurant in New Orleans. It's called Two Jacks. It's like gets up and gives this speech about how it believes in gender, and like you can tell this guy's paying attention. I don't think he was really entertained by like, I guess what you call like trench politics or
right.
Front line politics. But civilizationally, yeah, no, he's very aligned with us. He has this concept. Let me ask. I'll tell this, not because I want to hear how the two of you first encountered Cormac McCarthy. I'll tell you how I was, and this was in 2007, about a year after The Road had come out. And 2007, I read he gave a rare interview for Rolling Stone magazine. At the time, I was a subscriber of Rolling Stone magazine. That was an eventful year in my life. That was the year I discovered the Grateful Dead, Hunter S. Thompson, Bob Dylan, and Cormac McCarthy and Santa Fe Institute. So like wow, boom, that's the big bang of Chris Sandbatch. But the it's just, and you can go read it. It's unlocked, his interview that he gives, and he talks about how he's very concerned about, and this is 15 years ago, he's concerned about things like social media, identity fragmentation. Thing he's most concerned about, though, is man's endless propensity for violence, which I think probably, if there's a baseline characteristic of right-wing thought, like what is the distinction between the right and left at the most visceral level, it's going to be this, probably something along the lines of do you believe that, eternal war is an inevitability?
Right.
And Cormac McCarthy definitely did. But on other fronts, okay, for instance, he's very interested in ecology. He's a bug bro, and almost in the same way Ernst Jünger was. Ernst Jünger is this he's this he's an amateur entomologist, and McCarthy is this guy that he prefers to hang out with physicists and ecologists. And whenever he writes about things like trout, when he writes about hawks and everything, like, he's doing this not from a sentimental perspective at all. He's doing this from a very sort of hard-nosed, just like laws, eternal laws of nature. He certainly believes that there is at least early in his career, and I think later in his career he does too. Later in his career, I think what he thinks the underlying fundamental structure of the universe changes, but he firmly believes in hierarchy, in the in another sense of the word. This guy, I have a hard time imagining a guy that's more our guy, because kind of my concept of what our guy is him.
He's a man outside of time, and I could see why he was attracted to Spengler, who was also incredibly interested in botany. I mean, he gets that from Goethe. But my first encounter, really quickly before Prude goes, I was a kid in 2000. How old was I? I was born in 92. How old was I in 2007? I was almost in high school. And I remember, I don't know how I found out about The Road, because I just read I Am Legend, and I think there was someone mentioned to me about, The Road is you would like that. And then I read The Road and it was amazing. I couldn't put it down. There were certain parts that were confusing that controversial take, I think in some ways is better suited for film, like when he jumps back with his wife. But I think I didn't know this at the time, of course, because I was just doing it because, it's post-apocalyptic, it's cannibalism, of course, I Am Legend, it's vampire zombies, blah, blah, blah. But now I look back, it really is sort of, I think, one of the very few positive depictions of fatherhood and sacrifice in our current contemporary world. It's one of the very few depictions of a more realistic portrayal of what would happen in I believe it was a nuclear apocalypse. So I think The Road really struck a chord with me. And the charge that he's a nihilist is sort of ridiculous. It's calling Nietzsche a nihilist. We have a super chat about that. But anyways, Prude, go ahead. How did you first encounter Cormac McCarthy?
High school. I had watched The Road, with the film adaptation. And someone had told me that it was based off a book.
You're a few years younger than me, that's why.
I am 3 years younger than you, Gio. Yeah. And so
you're 3 years younger than me, Gio.
Oh man, that's crazy.
Nothing's a coincidence. And so, I know I had someone tell me that it was based off a book, and so I checked it out at my high school library. And that was the first one I had ever read by Cormac McCarthy, was The Road. And it was sort of a whiplash from how the movie takes the story in comparison to how atmospherically depressing the road is. I'm not even talking about the stuff that the characters do. I'm talking about the sheer atmospheric setting of the apocalypse. It is gone to shit, and he makes it very clear in the first 5 pages how bad things are. And so after that, I just started reading his other stuff. The second book of Cormac McCarthy's I read was All the Pretty Horses, in part also because it was a film adaptation. And so I read that, and then eventually I got to Blood Meridian probably about 5 years ago. And then I definitely understand why it's sort of the memeable Western, literally me book. But that was my first exposure, was actually the film, The Road.
Oh yeah, and Viggo Mortensen did an amazing job.
It's a great movie. Although I Googled the film just to see what had happened, who played the child, and it's just this most dysgenic looking, with a name that almost makes me think he's English, just because he looks that messed up. But no,
Has he played in
born.
anything after or no?
Yeah, actually. Oh, because he was diagnosed with like ankylosing spondylitis, some form of.
Oh God,
Never
that's
mind. Well, I can't.
So he
terrible.
is dysgenic.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Out of all the conditions,
Australian actor. Yeah.
I would
Okay.
want to have that the least. I mean, that just destroys your back and constant
He's
pain
also
all the
blind
time.
in one eye, but yeah.
Oh my God.
Because he looks normal as a kid in like 2009 when the film
Did
came
they
out.
film this in a nuclear waste dump? Is that what happened?
I
Like
don't.
that's what happened to Tarkovsky.
I don't know, but
but-
he was born in Australia. His
Oh,
older
maybe.
sister is the actress and singer Sinona Smith McPhee. But yeah, I looked it up and I was like, oh, this dude's an English actor. But that's a side note. I was just looking it up, wondering
You
if that
say
kid had been
English
in
actor
anything.
like English psychologist. These English actors, what do they want?
These English actors, these incestuous bunch, just like another form of Hollywood actor. But that's the case.
But that's how they say Tarkovsky died of cancer. But that was, I mean, who knows what the Soviets did to him? But anyways, that's another.
I was about to say,
I was really hoping one of you would tell me that you all are part of like the recent, like specifically E-right wave of Cormac McCarthy appreciators.
Oh, we are, but it's just I haven't. I need
an
to
earlier
read Blood
exposure
Meridian.
that we can cash our chips in now with the E-right, memeplex of Cormac McCarthy
Right,
fans.
because I mean I'm
Yeah,
not
Astro did an
at all
episode on
like
it.
I didn't read Blood Meridian I didn't read Blood Meridian actually till last year. Like the books that it's the Santa Fe Institute stuff, and then The Passenger and No Country for Old Men. The later work actually is the stuff that and because I mean I can crawl inside one book and stay there for like a year and a half and just just fire off different readings of it. And so I mean, that's almost all of my interest in him has been really in his late career. So like the fascination, I don't quite understand why he's so magnetic on the evil. Like I mean, Blood Meridian is the E-right. It's like Blood Meridian and Bronze Age Mindset. Those are the books, aren't they?
The Storm of Steel, Mishima's. I don't know. Do right wingers actually read Mishima? They actually read Sea of Fertility, or probably not. But
4 or 5 people will, and then disseminate their ideas on podcasts and Substacks, just like every other aspect of the right-wing media ecosystem.
It's like how I read Foucault, so you didn't have to.
It's like it's kind of like you and I. We read Foucault, so no one else has to.
Yeah.
Or
and
like
Nikki Vallejo in the chat. That is true about the English. Now, don't tell me how I know this, but I read this ethnographic study. Apparently, among the English aristocracy, that certain zest activity was quite common. It was like they I don't know, they did it with their siblings. Anyways, go ahead, Prude. What were you saying? That was a distraction. Yeah, Mishima.
I mean, it's the same way how like maybe 10 people in the sphere has probably. I'm not being very generous here, but there's like maybe like 10, 15 people that have read Schmidt and the concept of the political on dictatorship, the crisis of parliamentary democracy. Because everyone memes the friend enemy distinction, but I don't know how many people, if you were to like point a gun to their head, can you actually explain what that means in the context?
Nina Pake went into this, but most people in the right don't understand.
No. And I think actually Oren and I are going to cover it on Monday alongside Nick Land's issue with dialectics and the Dark Enlightenment, but that's just me shilling haplessly. It's again, like Cormac McCarthy's received this sort of new E-right love letter, which is funny because we were exposed to him when we were younger as teenagers. But like, I wonder how much of that really does have to do with the Blood Meridian thing and the judge and the violence. Because like, for me, if you read the dialogue about like, there's so much religious dialogue in Blood Meridian that's the far more interesting parts to me than the violence, because it's fundamentally American. We have this opening, of course, with respects to the Nacogdoches revival tent, but then you get stuff like, and I'm just going to read off of what I got here. No, said Tobin. The gifts of the Almighty are weighed and parceled out in a scale peculiar to himself, and no fair accountant, and I don't doubt, but what he had first admitted is that you put the query before him, bold-faced. Who? The Almighty. The Almighty. The ex-priest shook his head. He glanced across the fire towards the judge, the great hairless thing. You wouldn't think to look at him the way he could outdance the devil himself, now would you? God is a man, is his dancer, and you'll not take that away from him. And a fiddle. He's the greatest fiddler I ever heard on the end of it. The greatest. He can cut a trail, shoot a rifle, ride a horse, track a deer. He's been all over the world, him and the governor, and sat up till breakfast. And it was Paris this and London that in 5 languages. And you have to give something of a herd of him. The governor's a learned man himself, but the judge, the ex-priest, shook his head. Oh, it may be the Lord's way of showing how little store sets by the learned. Whatever could it mean to one who knows all? He's an uncommon love for the common man, and godly wisdom resides in the least of things, that it may be well the voice of the Almighty speaks most profoundly in such beings as those that live in silence themselves. I mean, like,
Whoa.
you're not going to find that anywhere else, and I would highly recommend that you get the
I love how you switch to your real voice.
The audiobook version of that, because I'm playing off the guy who did the audio recording, who has probably the best. If you want to experience like a quote unquote like cinematic version of Blood Meridian, I probably won't watch any film adaptation of this book because I'm terrified of what they're going to do to it in the year of our Lord 2023.
God, yeah.
But listen to the audiobook recording, and I'm gonna try and see if I can get the dude's voice so you know which one to listen to, because it's it's the best. So I'm gonna look that up.
But as a side note, I didn't mean that as like anti-Anglo posting. I was just saying that there was a hyperpendency among the aristocracy. But I think that anti-Anglo posting is cool. And I have a lot of positive things to say about the Anglo. I mean, I did flirt with anti-Anglo ideas back in the 2010s. But I think that the Anglo is a very complicated thing. I think even Spangler gets the Anglo wrong. I think there is a lot of Faustinism within the Anglo. But anyways,
I used to smoke anti-Anglo ideas behind the dumpster in my high school.
I used to be part of the Pine Tree Twitter. Anyways, you have a lot of thoughts on the Anglo, Christopher. But anyways, about Blood Meridian, this takes place. Does it take place in the Indigenous Wars? If I recall, or
1849. It takes really the last is the 1840s. So So like think gold rush. This is a time whenever what is really thought of as the West is really the area from like in the north it goes all the way up to Canada, but Natchez is kind of the start of the West, and the West kind of ends not too far into Texas. Blood Meridian, they're going down through Mexico, and you have to, because there's not really a good way to get to somewhere like California yet from there. Like your route to the Pacific is gonna center in Texas, and then pretty much got to go down to Mexico because there's only one road, and the road goes to Mexico City.
Yeah. No. Listen. Like Dylan has a great point in the chat, but I should only read it if you give me a super chat. But you know what? It is such a great point. I see the judge's entropy fits in everywhere, brings about the chaos that doesn't necessarily end up in violence, though there is no substitute for it. Gladstone is way more interesting to me. Is Judge Holden really a force of nature? I would take it. Judge Holden is a particularly bred American creature that is dealing with the sort of metaphysical insanity of the frontier, or is that maybe just me reading too much into it? I mean, both of you. This is a question for both of you, being Americans.
I mean, I think there's certainly that reading of it. To me, really, the judge is. And oh my God, this is a chance to, because I use that phrase "solemn providence" all the damn time, and everyone's, what is it?
You and Nick Land.
Solemn providence. Yeah.
But the judge is a very good manifestation of it. And this is when you talk about Anglos again. We're definitely squarely in the Anglo-American literary tradition.
Yeah.
So the judge is a Miltonian Satan type figure, okay, and really, if we want to get all the way into it, what's sort of going on is the judge as a character is representative of I don't know that I would say entropy, but I would say he's actually a manifestation of the rationalization process,
right?
Okay? So this like dialectical process of rationalizing and really smoothing the contours of the map, making things known, okay, and the elimination of the esoteric. He's very representative of this tendency in the Anglo-American world to have these sort of these characters that can
desacralization.
They can explain everything. The wizard, for instance, is another type of figure that you're the Prospero wizard from Shakespeare's, Tempest. The judge is a figure in this vein. Milton Satan, Prospero's, Prospero from the Tempest. He's a character that threatens the very concept of he's both a manifestation of the frontier, and yet he also threatens the concept of the frontier. Okay, because his ability, his tendency to rationalize things will remove the unknowability. It encloses the map in a way that makes frontier impossible. So it's this very vicious self-negation, self-negational aspect of Anglo-American culture is really the way I see it's just the way the judge comes off to me. And then because characters like this are only really interesting if they're well written, and you could see schlocky versions of this character everywhere, but you really the reason I call back to Milton Satan, because the thing you think about Milton Satan is the thing that is remarked on is the dazzling aspect of the prose. And in Blood Meridian, you have this character. This is a story. There are almost no characters in this story. Like there's characters that have names and things like this, but you don't learn anything about them. The only thing you have, really, the only truly magnetic force that exists in this entire novel are this character, the judge, and in particular the things he says. It's this incredible mastery of language, this takes this sacred concept that is language, and he flattens it. He's able to, he's able to, it is known to him, and he dispenses wisdom with language. That's to me, that's the role that the judge plays. I didn't mean to go on for that long, man. I just got started. But
I mean, it's kind of hard to not rant and rave about him, I think, in a lot of ways. For me, I think that the judge kind of is the character of cold, calculated means of which to justify unspeakable violence.
Yeah.
Like I admitted this earlier. I don't know if Sandbatch had came back on before he was off the air for those little 2 seconds there, but like we talked about this in the Old Glory Club, is sort of like that American ethnogenesis for like New England, is King Philip's War. And then later that kind of gets expanded in the 7 Years' War, what we call the French and Indian War. And, any historical reading of, the early settlers of American contact with the natives is brutalizing, unspeakable violence that sort of does not go to the contrary, like to the confines and connotations of what it means for, say, European warfare by the turn of like the 17th, 18th centuries. And so, and you can read these stories, and there are a lot of them to such a point, and Sandbatch and I have talked about this before on my channel, that, slavery / captive narratives of living under the Indians was I don't want to say like a pop culture phenomenon, but it really was. And that's something that I think people need to really realize in that instance. And so, expansion outward is this brutalizing war of racial extermination. And if you want to know what race war looks
you almost have to go to like Eastern European peasantry.
You kind of have to
find this level of violence. Yeah,
you kind of have to. But I'm gonna try and ramble on here for a little bit for a second.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry,
no problem. So yeah, Judge Holden sort of exemplifies what this is that for a lot of these sort of settlers, especially sort of the well-educated that sort of has this sort of pioneerism to it, the sort of nation of settlers bit, is that, I mean, you consider, for instance, even the earlier ones like Lewis and Clark, these are actually really well-educated men. These are your mix of sort of high class, I can finance this, and I can curry favor with my government to finance the expenditures of my journey. And if I can come back, not only will I be richer, but I can take along with this and enrich myself with knowledge. There is that sort of, I guess, what you'd call a Faustian desire to it. Whereas in like Blood Meridian, like Judge Holden kind of is this character that is the embodiment of like pure cold rationalization. There's not a real human feature to him. He is described as a pale, hairless man who's almost 7 feet tall. I think he says in the book he's like 6'6" in his moccasins. And so he's just this ability to be well learned, speak various languages, but here he is out here with these sort of, mercenaries going through Mexico to get to California, because again, there's no real roads all the way back there yet, not in the 1840s. You really won't really see that expanded until the Continental Railroad project kicks off, but that's, about 5, 10, 15 years later. And so what comes from that is that this man is large, massive, but at the same time, very quiet. Most people are kind of shocked when he makes his presence known. And everything about him in the book, outside of the unspeakable violence, is he can carry a cannon in one arm and fire it off. He can crush a man's skull that it seems so light, but he bleeds from his ears. You're there for his wisdom. You're there for what it means to survive and what it means to rationalize, especially if you're playing through the eyes of the kid. This sort of waxing poetic about the nature of how do I reconcile the ideas of unspeakable violence, racial extermination, making it your own way, and then still being well read enough to wax poetically about the Christian God. And you get various different points. You have the ex-priest, and then you have this sort of like weird, it's alluded to the sort of like this Dutch Reformed tradition because of all the things that he can do. He can speak, but he kind of also knows about native superstitions, about portraiture and taking pictures and things like that. It's just,
Man.
He's, to me, Cormac McCarthy just kind of highlights what that mentality must have been like for an American breed that isn't around anymore.
Or, well, I mean,
still around. Maybe he may have been the last one. I don't know. I'm on the fence about that sometimes because I can look occasionally. Is that sort of character still around? And it's okay. So the historical context, what the judge is a filibuster. There's almost no, and there are earlier drafts of this. It's kind of fascinating, the process by which Blood Meridian is written, which is Cormac McCarthy essentially wrote a large story that was very fleshed out, very emotive, and then spent 10 years removing every word from it he possibly could. Okay, so it's almost like he writes the story out for himself, and then through the subsequent 10 years of it is sort of, he removes more and more details that exist only in his mind. Okay, which is sort of what happens, and this is how you get that incredible sparseness at the end of it, because it's like it was a book that was written and then ripped apart. But some of the early drafts of it, they make allusions to the ethnicity of the kid and of the judge, and they're some Spanish blood, some English blood,
the
American ethnogenesis.
Yeah, mysteriously Irish somehow. A little bit of everything is in there, but there is these historical figures that where's that Dutch Reform shit come from? There's this famous character that was one of the founders of the area around Nacogdoches, Texas. That was referred to him as the Baron of Bastrop. He was a Dutch. He was born in a Dutch colony. Goes back to Europe, fights in the Napoleonic Wars, the last inter-European wars. Fights on the wrong side, so he's got to get out of Dodge again. And after he takes Napoleon's side, and after Napoleon gets waxed, he appears in the borderlands between Texas and Louisiana as one of the early founders, one of the early figures to cross over into Texas. These are historical figures. Another one, the most famous one, is of course William Walker. And when you're talking about the American West, it's easy to think of individualism, rugged individualism, this sort of thing over and over again. And I'm going to take a shot at my own people here because I get really sick all the time of the Cavalier culture, Moonlight Magnolias, that sort of thing. And I love it, actually. I mean, I love doing that sort of thing occasionally, but I like to take, in Cormac McCarthy, the best Southern writers are always very good at this. Faulkner is good at it. Walker Percy is good at it. And Cormac McCarthy may be the master of it, which is to take the South and just blast it in a way that kind of makes us weirdly proud of his ability to blast it. And he will constantly remind us that there's a darkness, there's a rot, there's some sort of strange Christ-haunted rot at the core of the Southern soul. And even when we leave and go somewhere out west, we bring this strangeness with us, okay? And and maybe,
but it's not in the way like a libtard would think about like this darkness to the South as being like prejudiced
No.
and backwards. It's a different type of darkness.
Right. Yeah. Like almost like this like layer of rot that's on the underside of a leaf that's been sitting in a pile for a while or something like that. We're a morose people. We are a violent people. Like, white, black, whatever. You can sample violence statistics. Even white people in this part of the country are considerably more violent than they are everywhere else. We are profit hungry. We're not very collectivist, but we're also not very individualist. We're perfectly willing to exploit one another. It's a rigid rigid hierarchical class society based, frankly, on how much money you have. How much. Go ahead.
Well, is this still like a reality though in the South about the class-based thing or no?
Yeah, it is. It's changed, and this is what I was saying whenever I was talking about. Do we still have this type of person in the South? And part of me wants to say I can see it in I can see some aspects of it in like the worst people. What I think in Hicklib, some people I think of as the worst people in the world, but then I can also see aspects of it in just the very religious people that you find on the edge of the southern frontiers. People that are still doing things like fishing for a living, people that are still involved in one way, shape, or form in those very old trades where they're still, they're not as media focused so much as they are focused on the other people that they're around all day. And this, some of these old Southernisms and strange ways have stuck around, and they continue to stick around. I sometimes think I'll be the last generation that has any of the distinctiveness, but I'm less certain of that now. I think it's got a couple more left in it.
Side note.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, side note, this is why people don't know this, but when people think of professional wrestling, a lot of this was actually born in the South. Wrestling, the way that it was a carny pursuit, was born in the South, in Georgia, in Florida Championship Wrestling with the Graham family. A lot of it's quintessentially like the character you're describing. I can think of like all of those those heels that they would produce, like Blackjack Mulligan,
land pirates. And here, I'm going. This is just for you, Gio. I'm going to
speculators.
I'm going to make this admission just for you, and I'm regretting this because my docs is actually available. But my mother, in the early 1980s, when she was in college, she was one of the like dancing girls for Memphis Saturday morning wrestling.
Whoa! She probably met Austin Idol and all those old timers.
Sid Vicious,
oh man,
all those old people. Yeah,
that's crazy. She meet Jim. Yeah, probably. I forget who was the booker at the time. I think it was it wasn't Chief J Strongbow. It was someone else. But man, that's crazy. That's it. Did she meet Ric Flair?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Oh, yeah.
That's amazing.
Whenever I occasionally run into I'll occasionally let that slip when I talk to other pro wrestling aficionados. But yeah, that is a perfect expression of of course, also the televangelists are famous. We're famous for our two-time and preacher men, of which the Judge is definitely one of these characters. There's a lot of Jimmy Swaggart in the Judge. There's a lot of Pat Robertson. There's a lot of
man. There's an apocalypticism as well that runs through this. So that's man, I really am. People have said I'm a spiritual American. Maybe I should have been born in America.
You are an American.
You are an American. Sorry, bud.
Yeah, that's true. That's so true. But Canadians are the worst example of Americans. But
I mean, descendants of either French fur trappers, early English explorers, or a bunch of, royalist Tories that fled not wanting to be lynched or have their homes burned down with them in it during the time of the Revolution.
No, but see, that's what I mean. Canada used to be great. It used to be filled with this archetype. It used to be
there was, and then it's been replaced.
Then Trudeau came along. I mean, Trudeau Senior, the stepfather.
Castro.
Yeah, exactly. And then, it was over. It was over. I mean, Canada was a nation of almost, I wouldn't say exactly in terms of the extreme violence of the American frontiermen. But Canadians definitely did have that spirit of the frontiersmen. I mean, even the French, even the Quebecois, with the Coeur de Bois, the fur trappers, had this sort of frontier idea. Of course, it was markedly different because order was instantiated, in the gold rush, in the Yukon, and also in the Laurentians. The government was involved from the beginning, unlike in America, where the state were expanded into the frontier. But Canadians still had this. Canadians were the most feared soldiers in World War II because of our propensity for depraved violence that we would do against the Germans, apparently. So it was, that's what I mean. Like the story also, I think, is continental. It is regional within America, the North Americas itself. I mean, I think even like, I don't know if you could extend this to Mexico, but I mean, definitely there's sort of
Mexico's
mythos
got
there.
its own story with like the revolution, and I think
Yeah.
by nature of being,
Like how gets to Mexico, it's like, well, we're gonna have to think about that one for.
I'd have to, but I mean, they have the revolution, and you've got sort of that like weird ranchero kind of mentality. But like, I'm not Mexican. I'm not,
The most
my
American
ancestors
Mexican
fought
thing.
them on more than one
Yeah.
occasion, so I really don't have too much to say on that end.
The
But
Texas
I mean, like,
martyrs. Yeah.
The most
well,
American Mexican thing is the cult of Santa Muerte.
yeah.
That's the most American Mexican thing.
But like, I mean, it does speak, Gio, to sort of like the differences in frontier culture. I mean, like to me, my favorite Stan Rogers song is Northwest Passage because like that is an explicitly Canadian song.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not. You can listen to most of his work, and the ones that are most fundamentally Canadian with people and references into a landmass that I don't have any relation to, but like it's foreign, but yet so familiar I can relate to it, and it just sort of validates everything that George Grant ever wrote about like the Americanization of Canada. And I think that that's a great loss. But I mean, I think that there's also a lot there about like apocalypticism that you just discussed. I mean, like, again, you find all of this where the discussion is about war and religion. And this is why like my Blood Meridian is, to me, I mean, yeah, there's a story there, but it's this cultural dialogue about what it means to do what you're doing and still adhere to sort of these, this what you're being paid to do and what your life depends on. I mean,
well, that's what I was gonna say. Like, I had this like blood boiling moment thinking about Obama recently. There's this video going around where he's in Greece. Did you see this, guys? He's in Greece, and he's like, "This is the birthplace of democracy," and like he's like this. Like I commented on Spiral's tweet about it. I said, Obama being it was Barack Obama that tweeted it. I said, Obama's the first like weird the world president. But when you think of it, like Obama being like this educated, like supposed like law scholar, when he uttered those words, Americans that cling to their guns and religion, he meant this in like such a sardonic shitlib way. But like when you think of it, it's like, yes, Americans clinging to their guns and religion. That's like not in like a negative sense. I'm not like being like a, libtard Canadian saying this. I'm saying this like in an affirmative way. This is the essence of America for a very distinct series of reasons that you two are, in American history, you two are, acutely aware of, right? Like, yes, Americans clung to their guns and religion, and this is like a foundational thing. So when Obama said that in this sardonic, libtarded way, he was actually reverberating a truth that I think is even deeper than what he thought. And for someone to be like this American constitutional law scholar in like the Harvard Review of Law, it's like, it was fascinating how he uttered that in like a totally like detached boomer liberal way. I mean, it's hard to think of Obama as a boomer, but like, I mean, guess he's black don't crack, but like,
well,
he's a boomer.
Much of his ideas sort of do emerge from that like new left legal tradition. And he exercised it quite effectively, and it really does illustrate sort of the tolerance of the Nation of Islam towards homosexuality as well. But that's a story for another time. But yeah, I mean, you are right. You are right.
Tucker Carlson episode.
Thank God for him doing that. But like, yeah, no, you're right though about guns and religion. And I mean, like again, Blood Meridian highlights this, I think, a lot. I mean, there's a whole. I'm going to read one more bit and then I'll be done. But like there's again it's that discussion over religion, guns, and how do you justify self-expansion and outright extermination. And so they I'll go from here. The judge cracked with the back of an axe to the shin bone of an antelope, and the hot marrow dripped smoking on the stones. They watched him. The subject was war. The good book says that he who lives by the sword shall perish by the sword, says the black. The judge smiled, his face shining with grease. What right man would have it any other way, he said. The good book does indeed count war and evil, said Irving, yet many a bloody tale of war inside it. It makes no difference what men think of war, said the judge. War endures. As well ask men what they think of stone. War was always here. Before man was, war waited for him. The ultimate trade awaiting its ultimate practitioner. This is the way it was and will be. That is the way and not some other way. I mean, in that short bit right there, not only do I, again, you read this book, I really think more for the judge than anything else, but that these are the questions that get asked. These are the questions that still get debated. And they kind of evolve in their own sort of weird way. Like if you kind of famously think about the 1941 war movie, Sergeant York, which again is a World War I film, which gets turned into like one of the greatest recruiting movies of all time for the Second World War, because, you know, we had to, well, it's ultimate recruiting movies, not because you had to get the draft to get Americans involved in the war. But anyways, it sort of tells us that, you know, these debates over religion still occur. And there's actually a dialogue in Sergeant York that kind of echoes this as well, where, who plays him? Is it Cary Grant or something like that? Or Jimmy Stewart? One of the two. And he's...
Wait, Sergeant York? Sergeant York played Sergeant York, I think.
No, he did not.
No, that's Audie Murphy. Audie Murphy.
That's Audie Murphy. Sergeant York is the 1941 film starring Gary Cooper. Gary
Cooper. Like a strong silent type.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, he's playing sort of this like, you know, Tennessee yokel again, right? And is kind of wants to win a woman over, has this like religious conversion. Anyways, but, you know, he's trying to fight really hard for his conscientious objector because he's like this newly converted non-denom Christian. And, you know, he's arguing with the head of the basic training camp. And he's just like, well, you know, he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. And you get this weird narrative, too, inside that movie as well. And I have a review that I need to put out. But it's just like he has this like inner debate. God, country. Which one do you want to do? Who do you want to serve? And it's sort of, I think that despite it being a sort of like propaganda film, I think it does speak very well to this like really hard hitting cultural question that has been a part of America really since its founding. It's really just been how involved we really want to be outside the world, and then how much we really want to focus on like what, you know, Obama sort of derides as guns and religion. And it's very funny because we talked about, Sandbatch and I've talked about this before when we talked about like the war with the Barbary states, the Barbary pirates. Like we get this like very diplomatic boilerplate answer from these like Arab or these Ottoman, you know, protectorate states. And they're like, well, the you know, these Mohammedans, they are told by their prophet that, you know, to convert these people and to seize treasure. That's why you have to pay us protection money to not do it, because you're no longer under the English flag. And Thomas Jefferson's like, oh, fuck that. We're going to go to war and exterminate.
You woke his Scots Irish right the fuck up, didn't it? Like, Enlightenment liberal Thomas Jefferson goes away, and drunk redneck Thomas Jefferson shows up. Like, oh, what you say you gonna do?
To a point we win so hard that the Pope himself offers blesses our actions, saying that we have done more to quell the anti-Christian cause than what anyone else has in like 100 some odd years.
And that's anti-papist Protestant
America, where Thomas Jefferson denies the divinity of Jesus and calls the apostles his biographers. Like that's sort of the American contradiction that exists within the country as early as its founding. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I like about Blood Meridian, is because like Cormac McCarthy writes this in 85, and he's just sort of highlighting this age-old debate. And I mean, even now in this sort of like post-World War II international liberalism, whatever you want to call it, global homo, like there's still that old bleeding edge of what used to be a progressive turn with like William Jennings Bryan or Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, just talking about like, yeah, we don't need to be involved. Like war was invented so Americans could learn geography. It's probably my favorite Mark Twain quote of all time.
But then a lot of right-wingers confuse that, and then that turns into gladio nationalism, where it's like America has to like ensure it's like, even though it's like decay. Well, that's another debate. We'll talk about that in stream another time. Anyways, go ahead, Prude.
You just seem to getting coiled up to be like, well, why the hell shouldn't we glass Russia?
Well, I mean, that's the debate.
I don't know. I don't want to experience when the wind blows in 2023, Sandbatch. That's primarily why.
No, but should America? Here's a question about the Barbary pirates. I mean, should America be fighting Somali pirates now? Is that like
Yeah,
again? That's
I
another
actually think that one.
manifestation.
That is something I don't understand why we don't. Like, I think that is like, well, that is okay because I work in international shipping. One of the things is every document that goes on that verifies the actual transaction that occurred. So you can't, like, just nobody can just walk up to the port at Navashiva and say that 20-foot container is mine. You got paperwork that says this one's the one you're supposed to get. Every single one of them says this waybill shall be governed by English law. And I'm like, well, where's the Royal Navy? Like,
this is some Jordan Maxwell type of stuff, like Admiralty law, when you cross over into the threshold. Anyways, yeah, go ahead, Sam. Yeah. So you're saying about the pirates?
That just makes perfect sense to me. It's like, why would America not be fighting piracy? And like, oh, we got to go do that other thing, or we need subsidies for the inner cities. Like, what the hell?
Well, then the American Navy might become more piratical as time goes on. It might have to. I mean, there's always been flights of fancy of the American Navy doing acts of piracy, but I think that as the geopolitical, I mean, there is one prediction that people on the pro-Russian side have. That is like, as America's geopolitical hegemony crumbles, then it will resort to piracy in these like disparate parts of the world. I mean, that's like a far off prediction, but I mean, certainly it's happened with Russia. I mean, they've taken like a lot of their assets. I mean, there's also, Iran has always been ripe for piracy by the American government. I mean, this is, I don't mean to like talk, like, I don't mean to go down like third worldism here, but I mean, I think like there is something to be said that there is an exploitation of that American spirit by the current regime that's like in the reins of it. And so I think that's why like a lot of people on the political right in America at least still have this romanticism, and that will lead, and I think it leads to sort of, again, like nefarious geopolitical ends. But I get what you're coming from, Sandbatch. I think that's but anyways, about Blood Meridian, though, if we had any concluding thoughts, I mean, how does I don't know if we should go spoiler alerts, but I mean, I'm assuming a lot of people have read it already. But
as someone who's like, my degrees in literature, like my first degree is literature and Southern literature.
Yeah.
This is really the thing that I like the most. It's the thing I'm most expert on. You can spoil any book for me because like most of the books, like I've just read 30, 40. Some is 40 books a month, and I would already know the ending to almost all of them before I started reading. So like, I mean, like, it doesn't bother me if you spoil it, but
no, but they cross paths. Like he keeps interacting with Judge Holden from what I can gather. Like it seems like the judge is almost like, again, like a force of nature. Like there's always the ever presence of him is there, and
right.
So Prude is back. He had a.
Did you see him?
Yes, I had to pee. Good lord.
You believe the lizard? Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not gossiping or anything.
No, heavens no! It's not like I can find out on the VOD playback or anything.
You sounded like a racehorse pissing in there. To quote Vito's metaphor.
He's gonna change his profile picture. Now
I'm not that predictable, you prick.
Now the thing about, and because you all brought up the frontier thesis, because this is what I'm going to setting up my conclusion here. We're being pretty laid back, but I do have a moral message specifically for our guys, and I think
all right, I'm not the one who gets to be preachy this episode.
I do have one, and you played right into my clutches when you brought up the frontier thesis.
Oh boy,
yeah,
I knew you would love it. I knew you would love it, Sandbatch. Yeah.
And Blood Meridian is a novel. I think, it is totally encapsulated by the frontier thesis. That is, it is the novel of the frontier thesis and the masculinity of the judge and the kid. This is a masculinity of the frontier. In fact, there's a lot of scholarship that's been done on this. There's a great book called Manifest Destiny that compares, that nominally it's a study of filibusters, the filibuster expedition that William Walker led to, take over Nicaragua. But in another sense, it's a study of American masculinity, and there are relatively few studies of masculinity and that sort of thing. Actually, it's kind of unusual that a scholar would take this tack. But she says there's the masculinity of the frontier and the South. And the South is the frontier. The South is the frontier. The South is the frontier America. It's like there's not as many correlates to this. I mean, there's a couple, but like Wyatt Earp was Canadian, so like you got to go all the way up to Canada. Because again, that Canadian frontier, like there's really more resonance in the Canadian frontier story, with Southerners than there is in the middle there. The Yankees don't have a lot of it. Yankees version of the frontier is they made San Francisco. Like, okay, but the masculinity of this, like this kind of violent, all of the things that you want to load, all of the concepts that you want to load this concept of masculinity down with. And Cormac McCarthy personally was able to represent it, and he represents it in his person to a lot of us, as kind of the last bastion of it. Okay, he's the last guy that's like this. When he died, it's like, the last man, he's just like me. And Blood Meridian is his great, sort of philosophical representation of that, that masculinity. And McCarthy is very interested in philosophy of history, and he certainly entwines this masculinity with this frontier theory of history. Okay. And I'm just going to leave that thread sitting there for a while, because we are going to talk about The Passenger at length, and I'm going to take a minute to talk about why I think everyone, and I mean everyone who has reviewed The Passenger so far is missing a lot of really important context. I mean, I think they're missing context in an incredible number of ways, but there's this one way that I think, and it's specifically referent to this type of masculinity and how it exists in the present and how it is entwined with our America, the best of American academia, or the best American scholars at the Santa Fe Institute, how it's entwined with their evolving concept of history. But yeah, no, back to y'all for a while, because I'm going to let that base for a minute.
I mean, it sits there, but I mean, it kind of encapsulates sort of the ending to the book for Blood Meridian. Just the kid, now the man, sort of meeting this otherworldly judge. Says he's one of the last of the true. And I think a lot of that kind of, I think about that in the context of these Southern writers, what we would call Southern Gothic. I mean, Cormac McCarthy, and I have said one of the great, when he died, I saw the news, I said one of the greats has finally put down his pen for the last time or something like that.
Wow.
And I mean, it's true. I mean, once you're gone, you're gone. I mean, people can sort of like ghostwrite your legacy. Like, I mean, pulp novelists do this all the time. Like, Dean Koontz is not putting out like 50 fucking novels a year. He's putting out maybe one or two, and he's sort of overlooking with his ghostwriters and something like that. Clive Cussler, when he was alive, was like this. His son is deeply involved in it. And I mean, like
in the art world, this happens. Titian had a whole army of people.
I mean, it's I bet you it's even more common there than it is. Well, maybe the literary scene's got it more because it's type, but I mean, like, and so he's the last. Like, where does this tradition lie now? And Sandbatch and I were talking about this prior to even because we were originally going to do this episode on something else, but like then all this news passed on, and so many people have just died in the last couple of days. Ellsberg, Berlusconi, Ted Kaczynski.
Our original idea was stolen by a certain someone yesterday.
Oh, well, I mean, it kind of worked out for the best.
It worked out for the best.
What was the original idea? What was it?
Ted
the Ted
K
thing?
It was Ted Kaczynski.
But everyone's doing it, so it became Cole really quickly, and
And I already gave my take in IM 1776.
Yeah.
And I had some shitlib go to my YouTube comments calling me like an extremist, and I said I condemn terrorism and God bless you for misrepresenting me. But like,
you weren't actually arguing like that Ted K. Like you were like that 1776 article I read. It's not like you were saying like Ted K was 100% right in what he did. It's like, no, it's like you had a very nuanced take on his actual body of work and like why he was sort of like
because Ted Kaczynski
off
is
the
just
mark.
like every other political author that anyone ever like talks about on the internet. Like 12 people have read his shit, and then everything else is just memes, man.
You know
and
who
like
read him? Trash World Citizen, Borzy, Petty Linkola Stan,
Pete Quinones,
Pete Quinones,
myself.
Meta Nomad, and that's it. You know, like,
I never read Ted Kaczynski. He's a character that's not really interesting to me. In fact, there's a lot, in a lot of ways, I think Cormac McCarthy actually represents the opposite side of a similar genealogy in American thought. And I am like,
wow, really?
And yeah.
Chad Haig has read him. Chad, exactly. That's it. That's only people. That's it. Okay.
It's like sort of a left-hand path and a right-hand path, and McCarthy, I think, fits in a tradition that really is like it is again, and I hate to keep returning to this, but actually I don't hate to keep returning to this because my buddy in the chat who's always calling me a retard and asking me why you record from the side of the street, and it's because I like to record from public because I'm like a 19th century flaneur. And
100%, yeah, it's like a Night Owls episode.
You just get to wander into my life. It's how I imagine streams or whatever. But again, it's a very Southern thing, and though there are sort of other people who've taken up the mantle of it and kind of blended with this. But this nature, this sort of this very harmonic idea of nature, this very ecological idea of nature. And he fits in with a like sort of conservation ethic that I place more with Aldo Leopold, Edward Abbey, Paul Kingsnorth even, though Kingsnorth is kind of like right on the line between these two types of like sort of environmental consciousness. But
I think he's kind of made his position a little more clear in his more recent posts.
And Kirkpatrick Sale actually, he's a founder of one of these concepts called bioregionalism, or and I think McCarthy fits in with them.
Very Hackonian.
Yeah, McCarthy fits in with them, and Ted K, I think, is like sort of representative more of like the Greta Thunberg style of environmentalism and Extinction Rebellion and that sort of thing. I think like Ted K, honestly, I mean, he was a leftist. He fits way better on the left than he does.
Keshawagi had a thread on this where he said that Linkola and Ted K, like they are not like the main. Well, no, but like that they aren't like the sort of like Greta Thunberg nihilistic version of apocalyptic environmentalism. That they actually like affirm life in a weird way. But anyways, yeah, that's another stream for another time. But it's funny you contrast Cormac McCarthy and Ted K, seeing as how they died in the same week. That they are both representative of sort of like what Spangler called like in the end of civilization when rationalism takes over everything, sort of like a return to like a naturalism and a second religiousness in a way.
I like how you linked that to Spangler right at the very end. I mean, I think that there's a lot of validity to that claim.
Because I wrote 30 pages on Spangler. That's why my mind is internally screwed because of my book. Yeah.
Well, no, you kind of need to. But I mean, like, no, I think that what Sandbatch brings up, though, is very apt in comparison to the two. Because like, you kind of have this, like, to take like the left hand, right hand, and then you have like the royal path question, but we can get to that later. But like left hand question, right, would be like, well, you have this over socialized, fragmented world that sort of Jacques Ellul and Kaczynski write about, which kind of touches on Marshall McLuhan, and that's why I referenced him in the IM 1776 piece. And so like their argument is just like tear the shit down, rebel against it, and do by all means to ensure. But and even then, right, like it has this sort of desire to see the end, because he writes this piece, and I think in the Anarchist Library it says the last one of his most recent ones that I think they have on the Anarchist Library is from like 2011. Why the industrial system will destroy itself. But he very much ends this on this, like, for him, I'd imagine it's a very doomer take, and I can't ever ask him any questions anymore because he's passed away. But he ends it sort of saying, like, listen, like, industrial societies will propagate or self-propagating systems. You do this through like these collectivizing ways and means to do it, ideologies, religions, traditions, cultures, practices. And from in turn, right, like even if you were to destroy industrial society or like to revert back to it, and you started calling out like conservationists, like, you know, and energy conservationists, when every time they conserve energy, like, great, you just opened up another avenue for the system to keep going in another way.
Yeah.
Why haven't you learned? And so he started like talking, and this sort of relates back to anti-tech revolution. But anyways, like he sort of he goes off and he sort of ends it sort of like this is a cycle that is bound to continue lest we take some radical departure. That radical departure never happened. Like no army of reincarnated Ned Ludds is like destroying Amazon, you know, AWS servers. That's not happening, right?
No,
not yet, probably not. But anyways, like, and then on the other hand, McCarthy sort of, I think, is like the right hand American answer to that question, because it's the same question I see, ironically, with the people that Sandbatch hates the most, and those are tech bros.
Well, I hate them too. I lambast them hardcore.
Oh,
Spangler.
I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of them, but they are the right hand path option of sort of what's left of that American ephemera, which is adapt or die, motherfucker. Like, those are your options.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, on the technology question, what is Cormac McCarthy's answers as a technology question? Look at who he hangs out. Look at who he hung out with. He's at the Santa Fe Institute. You know, where he's hanging out. He's hanging out with these dudes that think like you can spreadsheet, you know, all of history.
Existence.
You know, he's.
I wonder if he ever read Palladium Mag before he died.
I wonder if he partied with Mark Andreessen.
I will say this is on the original tweet. I tagged Santa Fe Institute and they smashed like.
Whoa!
Smash that like button, kids.
Yeah.
No, but that Daniel tweet really got under my skin. Not just because I'm like
which
Vatnik, but no, it's like it really. I'm not that much of a Vatnik, but like it really got under my skin because I feel like the current like iteration of the American empire is diseased and doesn't serve its own people. But I get what you mean. Like the tech bro, unfortunately, has taken on the mantle of this like sort of Faustian exceptionalism.
Well, hell, that's why I wrote about them in the obit piece for Ted Kaczynski. I mean, like,
yeah,
they fly in the face of what he stands for. But I mean, I think both are trying to get to a fundamental aspect of the fact that, like, look, in this, and I mean, Ted's writing about this like decades ago. This is a pre-2007 era. We're talking still where like most people got their news from the television, and like you could listen to The Only Living Boy in New York by Paul Simon and have a relative feeling that like, yeah, you get all the news you need from the weather report. But like nowadays, like people have like a weather app, people got like a regional app for news or whatever. Maybe they don't even pay attention; they just pay attention to the national politics. And we've like forced ourselves into like a global, like a digital longhouse. And we talked about this unconscious caracols thing earlier this week, where it was just basically like he told me this story in like January of last year, and it has like struck with me ever since. Where he's like in Pretoria, South Africa, and they're just like, oh yeah, by the way, this guy that looks exactly like me probably has ancestors that go back to like the Huguenots or whatever, and all of a sudden, you know, he's speaking perfect Americanized English, and that's a terrifying thing to think about.
Ancestors that fled the British, and
right?
Like,
you know, and so like you can't help but think to yourself, well, like, damn, like you can even say it tongue in cheek, like, oh, the Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. But like then you have tech bros that kind of acknowledge this, and some of them are kind of like lolcows at this point. Like, you know, I think of like Mr. Murphy and his arranged dating app, and he's also like really like just devastated by the fact that he's a father. And he tweets about it. And like, I get it. Sometimes, you know, like men have a moment where like fatherhood sucks, but like, I don't know if you want to tweet about it live on air, but like you get
but that's part of his bid. He's got a method to that.
Well, anyways, sure. And maybe it's not the world's greatest method because it's kind of sad, but like you get these sort of optimistic, well, maybe we can master this technology. So we're like, you have what I guess what you would call like the Wildman versus like Faustian man, where one wishes to return to the forest and the other says you're missing the forest, like you're looking at the trees, I'm looking at the forest and what this can be used. And I'm
looking at standing reserve.
I'm looking at standing reserve. I'm looking at timber, and I'm looking at lumber that can be used to create things. And it's the same. Ironically, you see the same debate over social techniques between like quote unquote trads and PUAs. And I will side, despite my inclinations to be traditional, I do actually agree with what Red Hawk says 9 times out of 10, maybe because I have read the same shit he has. But like
Oh
He's like,
man, the
look,
Beaver chat's blowing up right now.
but he's like, but
In
look,
this.
you can't escape. Like we live in a digital age, like adapt or die. And I think that that's sort of what comes down to the fundamental question here. And I think, you know, based off his associations, like McCarthy kind of was, you know, child of this like Tennessee Valley Authority lawyer. And I mean, like TVA's got its own issues, and we can litigate the, you know, all of the New Deal era.
No, you're exactly right. And then, wait, hold on. Another theme that creeps in again now may go slowly on turns are to introduce the passenger content. But of course,
There you go.
You know, the passengers a novel about New Orleans, and it happens in New Orleans. And but all the main characters are from Tennessee. And the two main characters, you know, Alicia Western, Bobby Western's brother sister incestuous combo that, you know, they formed the, you know, the characters in the story. Their backstory is their father worked on the Eagle Ridge project, and you know, in Tennessee, which is where they, you know, before they went out to Las Cruces, that's where the nuclear project was based. And it was, you know, it was there because of the Tennessee Valley Authority. And it's this very strange thing that people in middle and eastern middle Tennessee that have like 2 or 3 generations of history there, they've all got weird nuclear stories. Okay, they've all got stories about these Jewish scientists and these, you know, all these people that came and they drained a lake, you know, to make, you know, a hydroelectric, because they needed a hydroelectric dam to create, you know, this giant particle accelerator that
my friend Bob, who's from Tennessee, I went to grad school with, he also has these strange nuclear stories in his family. Yeah, it's true. So.
Yeah, so you know, and McCarthy, it's again his age. He was born in 1933. He's, you know, he's fully cognizant, fully conscious, a fully conscious person when we drop the nuclear bomb. And there's a huge, you know, I think it's kind of a shit libby thing in history. So I don't know how a lot of our guys feel about it, but the there's a, you know, there's this belief that the emergence of this nuclear age is this new thing. This is a thing Ted Kaczynski and Cormac McCarthy would both agree on, is that first of all that, you know, the way Cormac McCarthy returns to this evening redness in the West and this, you know, this eternal violence theme is that in The Passenger, he has a character say, I think it would be foolish to assume that the 20th century has exhausted history's, you know, limitless well of violence. Okay. And there's this concept in history that once we emerge into this thing, the atomic age, that we've changed things irrevocably, and that the nature of the, you know, the eternal war nature of mankind, this creates a pessimistic outlook. So you believe these people are permanently, that they cannot overcome war, that they can't do it. Okay. But then you also know that they have brought into existence this single machine that can vaporize whole continents. This is the only logical solution is we're toast. You know, it's or if you start trying to solve this problem, and this is where Cormac McCarthy and Ted Kaczynski diverge. Okay, so Ted Kaczynski, and this is where, you know, Elul will go this other way. Will go this the same way Kaczynski goes. Pentylin Kola will go the same way. A lot of the deep ecologists will all go the same way, and they'll say that we have to, you know, return to monkey, literally. Okay, it's like we have to blow
in the
up
woods,
you know, smash computers, you know, disembowel computers. Computers have lost their mind. Well, you know, like computers are off their rocker.
Curb. Yeah, rip the computer's head off. Yeah.
and then there's this alternate theory, which I'm going to go hang out at the Santa Fe Institute with, you know, these guys who are, you know, they're modeling risk. They're modeling civilizational risk with like Urbit or, you
existential threats. Yeah.
Or some, you know, or some dumbass sort of thing like this. And he's taking a very old Anglo-American position, in fact, actually, which is the stewardship position. He's like, okay, so we're faced with we're going to have to change. A lot of people say we're going to have to fundamentally change the way we look at things. McCarthy sort of takes this idea And it's sort of and it manifests itself in The Passenger. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But McCarthy takes this idea. He says we're going to have to change. We're going to have to change the way we think of history. We're going to have to change the way we behave. We're going to have to, and this sounds kind of shit-lippy. Sounds kind of like the left. But the thing Cormac McCarthy did that I always loved is he was always there on behalf of the non-extreme progressive, not even the extreme, because it's very hard to place politically, but he was always there to represent the alternative. So like if like it's like yes we can, change is progress, all of that sort of shit. He's got this other idea where change doesn't have to be that. We can look actually frequently at our own selves, and we might have to make some hard decisions about what stays and what doesn't, but that there is a way, specifically within America. I don't even know that he would say this about Europe or Spain or Japan or Russia or anywhere like that. That you have to sort of become the Anglo-American that Japanese people think you are, and in their own way. And that's sort of what that's what, to me, that's what I see in the Santa Fe Institute stuff. And the interest is like, okay, so we have done this thing. We've brought this existential red line risk into the world. We're responsible for it. Okay. We have to manage this risk as best we can. And if we don't take this outlook, then we have to take the Ted Kaczynski outlook. Okay.
Well, that's even Teddy Roosevelt believed that about conservationism. That was his,
right.
Like,
exactly.
aristocratic.
This is the Anglo-American. This is the progression of the Anglo-American. Just in the same way that the frontier represents the sort of Landian concept of exit. This is, and I think Land is actually, I think Nick Land is coming to this very similar, sort of like thought process that McCarthy is toward the end of his life. And I think, this sort of has to be the Anglo-American ecological stewardship of the world, that you have to take this seriously. We have to start to be honest with ourselves about certain aspects of our own weaknesses. We have to be able to play to our strengths, and essentially we have to just manage this risk indefinitely. And this is like there's the when we say this, we have to manage this risk indefinitely. We've just broken the cyclical theory of history. We're no longer there. So if you believe in the cyclical theory of history, you believe this risk can't be managed, that it's just going to happen inevitably. And like this cyclical theory with nukes equals everybody dies. And it's like,
well, I mean,
something's breaking
be
either
the
way.
concern. That would be the concern, though, that are raised by, I mean, some of them would consider lolcows, but I mean, like a lot of the rationalist camp would probably argue
Nick Bostrom.
Nick Bostrom, especially with the vulnerable world hypothesis. Like, look, it's either like the cyclical theory of history happens, and with nukes or technological info hazards, like say in his example, right? He's like, well, what if it was like really easy to make a nuclear bomb with like household materials and blah 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 blah. It's an interesting paper. You can go listen to it. Actually, being narrated by Skeptical Waves. I thought it was interesting. But like he was definitely advocating for like how do we break it with the ability to control things, and then there are others that would say that it's not likely to happen. And then you get this sort of Spangler bit, like the revolt against nature is futile, and we're going to fight it out to the bloody end. But like it's also funny because like guess who got their start in Santa Fe? It's David Lynch got his Associate of Arts at Santa Fe College.
Oh my God!
And you mentioned
connections are endless.
Yes, the connections are endless. And if you've seen Twin Peaks Season 3, The Return, one of the best and most surreal fucking episodes of that entire thing opens up, and it's sort of the creation of like the Bob entity from the first two seasons, this demon thing that plays a central part to the murder of Laura Palmer, Fire Walk with Me, and even plays a part into like Kyle MacLachlan's character, Agent Cooper, trying to like fix everything from the past. And it opens up this great evil is unleashed at the Trinity site in Los Alamos. And, the explosion of the first nuclear weapon unleashes the kind of evil that the great powers that be, in his instance, kind of an interpretation.
That's funny because
send out the Laura Palmer character.
Well, the series Carnival had the same thing about Trinity.
Yeah.
Yeah. People don't mention Carnival. That's a
forgotten,
But
Lynch himself is part of, ironically, I think kind of part of this, that like actually no, like the great wellspring of human violence towards man and the evils, both worldly and otherworldly, do still exist from the 20th century. And we live under the long nuclear sort of Damocles that still is with us. And It's just something I find very interesting that even David Lynch, of all people, finds in this weird intersection.
We need to bring back that Helios thread about how nuclear energy is demon energy. I remember I went schizo one time on that, and Keith Woods was like, Gio, what are you talking about? I got ratioed pretty hard once by saying that nuclear power is demonic. But anyways, go ahead. I know that's not popular now. I mean, I shouldn't admit that, but that's pretty cool now. That'll get me ratioed by certain anime accounts. But anyways, go ahead.
I thought you were friends with the anime accounts. There could be anime accounts here.
This is another thing that I wanted to point out with respect to Cormac McCarthy because of the Santa Fe Institute stuff. So, like, and really a lot of this reflects this sort of conceptual theory of the evolution of this theory of history, which, I mean, McCarthy himself is almost beyond the nation state in the way he starts to think of history and, you know, the past. And if you want like a little bit of a window into like what the contemporary elite view of the world is, you know, we're not going to look at your national affiliations so much. We're going to look at your institutional affiliations quite a bit. The Santa Fe Institute is undoubtedly one of the it's very, very influential institution within the regime. You know, there's an archipelago of these think tanks that I like to talk about a lot of them. But, you know, like there's the Argonne Labs at University of Chicago, the Center for the Advanced Study of Behavior at Stanford. A lot of these places that really, whenever you're talking, if you want to go grab a metaphor like cathedral, this is where they really are. Okay. And Tavistock Institute's another one. But the existence of Cormac McCarthy inside this perimeter it's like when you talk about your guy that you've got on the inside, that was him. You know, he was the guy, you know, he was really he's the guy that's gonna, you know, he's the white man who's not afraid to talk about Jewish power on page 1 of his last novel. You know, or, you know, something like this guy, he's this almost uncancelable figure. And finding him inside the network of this, when you look at the Santa Fe Institute, you're looking at a group of people that are on they're on such the bleeding edge of what is considered contemporary, you know, intellectualism, that it's hard to assign them positionality. You know, positionality really comes later. As a process of categorization. So like someone goes out there and finds a new thing. Maybe it's world systems theory, you know, like not Braudel. What was his name?
Wallerstein,
yeah. Okay, so somebody finds world systems theory. What is it? You know, it's like, I don't know. It doesn't really sound leftist. Doesn't really sound rightist. It takes a long time for this thing to be, you know, classified and assigned a category. And McCarthy is one of these characters. The reason he's hard sometimes to nebulously call him a right-wing figure is because he's way out there in advance of what's going to be called right-wing. Right. So like, and I think this is a very important point with respect to him, because, you know, especially his last 2 novels, they're almost like this. They're almost a plaintive. They're almost a plea to American men to sort of like recognize, maybe, I'm not saying stop clinging to your guns and Bibles. I don't think he would ever say that. Really don't think he would ever say that. But he says, you are going to have to update yourself. Like, look at this. You know, that this is where the ground is being contested, you know, on these questions. Okay, so what is history cyclical or linear? That's no fun. Is history topographical? I mean, is history topological? Is there a shape to history? Is history a real thing? You know, what is the dimensionality of history? What is the dimensionality of a state, right? Rather than, a lot of these more process-oriented questions. I think he's begging certain aspects of American society that have been disengaged from this debate. Okay, there's no way to claim that what we would consider to be like red-blooded American men, or like the meteor side of America. There's no question that we're currently incredibly outnumbered, you know, on the bleeding edge of what you would think of as intellectualism. And, you know, in a lot of ways, this last set of books he writes is a primer for this is where it's at. This is where we're at. So he even gets this Spangler landmark. It's like, so we're going to talk about Spangler here, and then we're going to talk about what is good from Spangler, what you can keep from Spangler. Okay. And that's, in a lot of ways, it almost, these last two books that he writes, in addition to being, I think, probably the best books of the last 50 years, there's a didactic subthread in them that seems aimed at a very peculiar population. And I think all three of us are in it. And I think everyone that's listening to us talk are in it. He's talking very specifically to us, and like, you look at him, you say, he's just like me. It's because he is. He literally is just like you, and, he's got some stuff to say because he knows he's about to die. He's like, I'm about to die here. Look, here it is. It's in the code. Here's the codex.
But let me ask you, though, I want to get to Prude, but let me ask you, how does the road fit into his corpus then, in terms of his grand vision of things? Is that sort of like the Lincolnian, like, shall life prevail sort of thing?
I think the road is this point where, the road is this test where, in terms of all great artists have to have these transitional moments in their career. And the road really, for me, to me, this signifies this kind of very similar to Shakespeare entering his last phase, where, the boundaries between tragedy and comedy are going to start to fall, fall apart. And he does it in this very backwards way, of course, by writing the bleakest novel, I think maybe possibly it's ever been written. And then gives it a happy ending. It's the only happy ending that we get in any Cormac McCarthy novel, period. It's like, so that's how you're gonna invert this trope or whatever. But that choice that he makes to choose to turn away from nihilism, to turn away from the bleak ending, I think that signals that is a shift in his career, in his own method of thinking, and like sort of plateau, what brings us onto the plateau of this sort of late stage gray eminence style figure that McCarthy becomes. That's where the road really comes in for me. I will admit I don't like the road all that much. It makes me so squeamish. I'm so squeamish. It's just unrelenting bleakness.
Yeah. No, but that's what I mean. Like, it seems there's there's through line between so many like quintessential American figures to go back to the frontier thesis. You could say the cowboy, the mercenary, the pro wrestler, especially in the Southern iterations, the way that they would travel and so forth. Then finally, like the post-apocalyptic figure, like in the road. Like, I think, like, really, I know this is gonna sound stupid, but the quintessential American song is "Wherever I May Roam" by Metallica. Like, think of it like where my
you were gonna do that, but I was gonna say "All Along the Watchtower."
Oh yeah, that's
two riders in the distance. The wind began to howl. Same.
Yeah.
That image appears over and over. Yeah.
But think of it like "Rover, Water, Nomad, Vagabond, call me what you will." Like, it's like, wherever I may roam, where I lay my head is home. Like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, there's something about the explorer or I would say it's different than the European colonial adventure. It's very much like enclosed within its world, but the Highwayman is another one. Like, there's something very unique to it that isn't the European colonial explorer. It's got similarities, but and even like
no, because he's of the thing. He's of the thing. He's inside the thing.
Yes.
He is a native inside the system. The European colonial explorer is always the other. It's always exotic.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
These things with McCarthy, Nacogdoches is not an exotic place. This is a place that we've been a bunch of times. I don't know if you're familiar with the other. This is a novel that I think McCarthy probably was very familiar with. It's another one that's in this tradition. William Burroughs wrote a book called Cities of the Red Night. Are you familiar with it?
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah. And it's just this dark, piratical, like American novel with this like sort of like opioid dreamscape, Yucatan Peninsula.
Oh yeah.
One
That's
step
also
closer,
a good
like,
pick.
what the hell?
It's a good pick, though. One Step Closer. That's my favorite Linkin Park song. But anyways, go ahead, Sandbatch.
I was looking for the Boulevard of Broken Dreams by Green Day.
That is like the quintessential American song. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's too bad that like what's his name? From Green Day, what's his name? The lead singer.
Billy Joe Armstrong.
Billy Joe Armstrong, yeah, like it's too bad that he's like a libtard now. But like
is anyone surprised by this natural evolution of these artists from like the 2000s? Is anyone?
Has he become a
I mean, like
woman?
you famously
Yeah.
you have famously tweeted along with several others. It is a blessing that Kurt Cobain is not on Twitter today. Raging shit lib. Like I'm not surprised that Billy Joel. I'm not surprised Billy Joel Armstrong is a raging shit lib. I'm not surprised that Rage Against the Machine is having like $500. I'm not surprised by any of them.
I'm surprised that Billy Joe Armstrong has not discovered he's a woman yet.
I'm waiting for it.
Cobain would have been. Cobain.
He would have been the first. He would have been a trailblazer right alongside the Wachowskis. And unlike the Wachowskis, he probably, there's no wonder why they consider him a transgender icon. He blew his brains out. Like,
oh God!
I don't.
No, but Rage
fight me.
I can hear
There's the
like,
truth.
all of New Orleans is shaking as the algorithm wears up.
I don't care in that respect. Like, but like the other thing about the road, I feel like this is really important because he gave an interview about the book to freaking Oprah Winfrey of all people. And she asked him what inspired the book. And he gave a pretty straight up answer. And he says, I would like to know what El Paso, Texas would look like about 100 years into the future. And he said, Fires on the Hill, which if you've ever been to El Paso, this is the only major metropolitan area in the state of Texas that is built around a mountain range. It's got the Franklin Mountains, the very tip ends where the Rockies kind of flame in there down into Mexico. And you kind of go up there and you sort of begin to see, and alongside up in the way into New Mexico, it's very pretty. And so he's intimately familiar with this sort of area. And he's, and of course it's dedicated to his son, John Francis McCarthy, who was a Zoomer born in 1999. It's strange to think about a man who's as old as he is, had children later in his life, but that's also an American tradition. Look at John Tyler, 10th president of the United States. But he had it was a mix of dedicating it to his son, but also conversations that he and his brother would have about the war, if the war that would ever come between like nuclear apocalypse. And so, you got the road is actually an exploration of what happens if, say, cyclical history happened and the war happens and man is over. And he had said that when everything's gone, the only thing left to eat is each other. And I think that that's kind of an important thing to consider when we take a look at like, well, what do we do if we did bring about an end to ourselves? I mean, there are plenty of other books that have taken a look at this. I mean, John Michael Greer's talked about it in Retrotopia. Like, you can't force a technological regression. The only way that really does come by is either in sort of like the collapse of complex systems, like Joseph Tainer sort of style deal, or, that knowledge gets lost. And then you sort of get like the Toynbees and the others in the world. And again, funny enough, Kissinger's written about Toynbee, Spengler, and Kant in one book. But the funny thing about the road to me is that, like, yeah, it's haunting and absolutely dull. But I think about the fact that he lived under the gun for forever. World War II onwards, we've lived under a nuclear gun. And then you guys talk about Trinity. If you ever go to the Trinity test site in Los Alamos, you ever visit that area, and you go outside of it, and you got you're not too far from White Sands either. There's a little display, sort of understanding of the testing of the Manhattan Project. And then there's a little theater. And you're going to go sit in that theater, and you're going to play about a 35, 40-minute documentary, which is about the history of the Trinity testing of the Manhattan Project, and then the escalation of nuclear war. And nuclear testing and all the bombs that we've ever dropped, both on like the Bikini Atoll, the atmospheric tests. We've wanted to nuke everything. Hell, they wanted to nuke the moon in an ARPA.
The Kuiper Belt. It was in a documentary with him shot.
Yeah. But I mean, so you kind of honest to God, to this day, and I was there like was like a teenager, I think. But to this day, I still attest that that's the scariest film I've ever seen.
The day after?
No, not the day after. This little 40-minute documentary about nuclear testing at the Los Alamos.
Wait, no. You know what's scarier than the day after? The BBC
Threads.
came out.
Threads. Yeah, that movie's terrifying.
Oh god,
That movie's
the
terrifying.
face getting melted. Yeah,
but like that 40-minute documentary is probably the scariest film I've ever seen. I probably, if I were to go back and watch it now as an adult, maybe not so much, but like as a younger teenager, it's scare the shit out of me. And so, like, I think The Road is sort of that weird, like, well, what if we do it, right? You know, what if we destroy ourselves? And, like, what do we resort to? And I think we would resort to the very savages that Judge Holden, the kid, and the rest of those mercenaries have no problem killing.
You know what the scene in The Road that just makes it so it's just like literally turns my stomach over? It's the scene where, you know, they're hiding by the road and that, you know, the caravan comes by.
Oh, yeah.
And he gets caught, and you know that caravan cannibal is like laughing at him, so you know, because he knows you only got 2 bullets left.
Yep.
You know, whew, that's some Tennessee hillbilly dark right there.
When he goes into the basement of the mansion there, that was like, that terrified me. Yeah.
The description of what a flare gun will do to the human face is a delightfully brutal scene towards the end. But yeah, I mean, also just what slow death by infection looks like when you don't have access to antibiotics or first aid.
Oh my god.
But yeah, I mean, I think that it actually fits rather well with his corpus of work, not just with respects to ecology, but also just like a man born in 1933. So he's a few years older than my grandmother, who's still living. And it's just like you grow up from depression to World War II to this never-ending threat of the world, and ways in which we can kill each other, while at the same time, right, you have this vast industrialization, also deindustrialization of America, and we've fundamentally changed since he was a young
digitalization
man.
of America.
Yeah, but I mean, again, who he associates with, but also what he was alive to see, I think makes him probably one of the most interesting writers of our time. And I think you and I were talking about this in private, Sandbatch. I just don't know who succeeds him or what's left of that tradition.
Well, I don't know that anybody can. Well, you know, like there is a sense in which
there will be some frog that does it. Maybe
there is a sense in which the banner of Southern, there's a lot of banners. This is one of these problems with you know, like depending on these characters as they get aged, not replenishing the well over and over, is that these characters that normally would only have to carry one banner end up having to carry a bunch of banners. Cormac McCarthy is carrying the banner not only of Southern literature, he's also carrying the banner of American literature. He's also carrying the banner of American masculinity. He's all of these things he's doing. You know, he's the whitest man in the world, you know, in a very real sense in a lot of ways. So he goes down, you know, the flag bearer goes down. Who's there to pick it up? You know, we obviously you can't replace Cormac McCarthy with another Cormac McCarthy because you know. But
there's no protege.
You have to spread some of this weight around, you know, So I mean, I think like you will see decoupling. Oh God, I hate to bring this sort of discourse up, but I mean, this fragmentation is going to probably continue, and McCarthy he's on board with this. This is very, you know, this conceptual way of looking at history and time sort of accepts this. As you know, accepts of the process of fragmentation. It says, okay, these are the new rules. The old rules are over. Okay, so the new rules is you're not going to be able to replace me. This culture that we exist in now. And you know, some people will say
it's hyper-modernity. That's, you can't by definition.
Yeah, people say there is a global monoculture. Sure, but I mean, it's global monoculture. It's like microwave foods, like nobody's gonna take that seriously, you know, like as you know things that we would consider, you know, like serious cultural production, they've been moved into a smaller space and a considerably more fragmented space. I don't think it's gonna be several centuries again before I think we could see a unifying figure like Cormac McCarthy. But we could produce Southern writers who are, you know, the heir to the Southern literary tradition, or the, you know, Dan Baltic could, in a sense, you know, like be, you know, one aspect of the the next face of the American literary scene. I think he's
Marty
certainly,
Phillips, maybe.
yeah.
I would give Marty a lot of credit if there's going to be someone that might be able to do it, it would be him. I'm going to have him on pretty soon, but I really can't give enough praise to his
You
newest
motherfucker! Oh, I asked him to.
He DM'd me asking if I wanted a review copy. I wasn't going to say no to that opportunity to review.
No, but
it and
I
have
said
him
like
on.
I'd bring him on Content Minded because I think more of the tweets though. I'll probably cover his tweets because I remember like the old ones they used to post when you like went away for a bit.
Well, I just love his book. That's
Yeah.
really that's all my real interaction with Marty Phillips. Actually, I don't know him from Adam, to be perfectly honest. And he DM'd me out of the blue, and he was asking. He's just like, I think we were mutuals at one point in time before, and I'm like, probably
Marty's
not.
an old head.
Marty's
Yeah.
an old head. I am not by any stretch of the imagination. And so, but like I read his book, and it's a wonderful 4 vignettes about sort of the turn of the world after 9/11 in the 2000s. It covers everything from literally one of the jumpers on the day of that attack to like this Heart of Darkness story with respects to cartels and drugs. And it's really good. And also the housing crisis in 2008.
No, but like, it's funny because I remember like, what was I going to say? Like, people were talking about, can we admit that Stephen King's the greatest living author? It's like, like this is like culture industry schlock. This is so dumb. Like literature, like film is approaching this.
Stephen King at least had the decency to admit that Cormac McCarthy was one of the greatest writers ever.
Really, eh?
I checked his timeline before we went live because I wanted to know what that piece of shit had to say. And I was pleasantly surprised that he gave Cormac McCarthy his due. And then his next tweet right after that was about Trump. And I was just like, this is it. The coolest thing he ever wrote was a story about a sensitive young man who goes on a fun posting event. And that's his best book. Sorry, kid.
I just want to point out that I'm disgusted with myself for understanding that sentence. Disgusted with myself for understanding it.
No, Picton is still alive, but is Picton still alive?
I don't know, actually.
I think Picton is. I mean, Gene Wolfe is dead, right? So Picton's still alive. He's probably the greatest living writer right now.
Oh, people try to say Don DeLillo. Okay, look, for my money, I got like 5 writers that I think have potential that are in my head. Dan Baltic's one of them.
Oh wow!
You know,
not bad for one book and a short story about a dominatrix who threatens to.
We don't have a lot to go on. We really don't have a lot. Is there
H.P. Lovecraft? No.
No, God.
Maybe.
I like his short stories, but
yeah, I really like his
Neo Lovecraft.
He's got to wait for the card.
Yes, yeah, Neo Lovecraft, not H.P. Lovecraft. I don't like H.P. Lovecraft at all. That's just a weird foible of me. But I like Zero HP. He's pretty good sometimes. I think, J.L. Mackie wrote Cowboy Church. I think there's the beginning of a literary scene. Like, but again, the problem I have with it is it's a little too self-conscious. It's a little too self-consciously a literary scene. There's a little, God, I have such a hard time looking into the future and like seeing where this is going. But there's work there. I do think there's something there. There are a couple of writers. I'm not going to name the other ones. I don't feel bad plugging Dan Baltic, but I'm not going to name who I think the other ones are.
There was this. I forget why I thought this, but like that scene in Metropolis, how like the priest is up in the hill and he sees like the city, like it's a big metaphor for like the the Tower of Babel. I just had this picture of like Moldbug descending down from the staircase and the Devere Ball and like all those like fake edgelords just like looking him on and like, oh my God, like that's like the vision that came in my head. It was like,
I was pointed. I don't think
like that's way
Moldbug is not on my list. I think Moldbug is a good writer. I don't think he's a great writer.
No, but I was just saying like it's funny how Moldbug like ushers in this need for like alternative like writing and art forms, but yet like he himself becomes this like kitschified figure of like the guru of reaction, but it's like in this like self-contained world that that's what makes it kitschy. Like it has to be like this like self-referential world that's like edgy, but it's not too edgy. It's like, you know,
But
literary types
edgy
can write
enough that I
about.
can post.
Hold on, let me interject.
Edgy enough to post on Substack to get 2 separate
wait.
projects funded.
Yeah.
Chat says, don't tell me 5 best writers and then just give me your online bros. Bro, I act like the scene is dark out there. I think we are the best. Sorry.
What about Franson? You read Franson?
I think we are the best. Sorry, I'm taking our side.
Okay, the question would be like, do you mean American writers or just greatest living writer in general? Because I would be willing to expand my reach outside of the United States to have a discussion.
Yeah.
Because I would argue real quickly that Michelle Thomas or Michelle Houellebecq is probably one of the best living writers of our time.
Oh, yeah. Best,
yeah.
He is one of the best, and he is still alive and still writing books. So
is he working on a new book?
He's working on something. I don't know what the hell he's doing right now. I think he's still
trying to release.
I think he's still suing to get that thing not.
Yeah, Kirak. He's suing Kirak for the prawn thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he wants that out there.
I can't like watch. I can't do that. Like, I am not very good at parasociality. Whenever I keep interrupting because I'm like reading the chat and I'll respond to it out loud. I'll read like, oh, that was a good one. There's no way Zero HP Lovecraft's one of the greatest living writers. Yeah, I don't think he's one of the greatest. He's good, so, but he's not. He's also not on my 5.
But yeah, like I'm sorry. Like if we're expanding this to just like not the American writing scene, then yeah. Michelle Thomas is on that list. Sorry, but he is probably one of the best.
There's consistently always good Russians. We just don't get them translated for us.
Yeah. Well, someone mentioned Thomas Ligotti, but I mean, I haven't read his fiction. I've only read Conspiracy Against the Human Race, and I thought it was like, ugh. You know, I don't want to get into it, but you know, I had a friend who was obsessed with that book, and he's like, Gio, I can't read it anymore.
I have only read his short stories of I have a special plan for this world in the Nightmare Network. Those are the only 2 of his work that I've read, and I think they got graphic novel adaptations. I don't know him all that well, and I feel like a lot of the more interesting writers nowadays, like I mean, consider
fiction.
Well, the Russian, right? Like. I think about Value Select, and they have this little short song about like it's really hard for a freelance artist to make money without drawing furry porn. So I mean, like I'd imagine it's the same for writers. But no, actually, I think one of the more interesting writers is what's his name? He is a Russian, and we actually have translations of his work. I'm trying. What is it? Dmitry Glukovsky, the guy that wrote the Metro series. Like he's literally started by putting these chapters out on the internet, and they got popular. And it got picked up, of course, by 4A or whatever they are now, that video game group. I mean, the games are good, but like 2033 is actually a really interesting book. And I would recommend people read it. And I think that he's up there as an interesting writer. I don't know if he's one of the greats, but like there are still people putting out good fiction, and it's worth our time. I think really one of the biggest problems with like political e-right punditry in general is that you're forced to be reading all these like political philosophy books. And like you're doing this to write your own book, or I do it for a book club with patrons. I'm right now reading The Death of Ritual, so I can have patron book club for July because I'm going to be out on this conference this month. But like the only pieces of fiction I've read are by fiction that people want me to review and to put out there, and I'll read review copies. I find them interesting.
Yeah, same.
Show my friends. And so I'm incredibly limited, because if you ask me what's my favorite book of all time, I'm going to tell you it's The Brothers Karamazov. I think it's the greatest book ever written in terms of fiction.
Wait, you know who else said that?
You?
Cormac McCarthy.
Really?
Yeah.
Did not know that one.
Spangler also said that.
But like that's my favorite.
I have my 4 greatest novels ever written list, and mine and Cormac's were almost identical. It was kind of interesting. Yeah, it's like mine is good.
What are your top 4?
Brothers Karamazov, Moby Dick, Sound and the Fury, and Middlemarch. I think the only one we had different was Middlemarch.
Man.
What are your top 4?
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
I haven't read enough. I would say Siddhartha is definitely up there. I I mean, I know House of Leaves is like a meme answer now, but I do quite enjoy House of Leaves. I don't know. I read like a lot of theory fiction. Like, I mean, because like that's an extension of being a theory cell. Like, I think
Could have sworn you said a lot of furry fiction.
no, God, no, God, no. There is this like for my book, I actually have to like. There's a bunch of essays that are quite illuminating, even like from the early 2000s about the furry thing. But like, I think like Glass Bead Game is up there. Yeah, like Herman Hesse is really great. I would say The Blind Owl, although I have a different interpretation than Jason Riza Giorgiani. What else? I don't like I again my old man reads a lot of fiction. I don't read a lot. I don't read as much fiction. I'm embarrassed of that fact. I read a lot of poetry. I don't read fiction. But like let's see. I mean, yeah, Brother Karamazov is probably up there. Oh God, I'm blanking now. I don't know. I would definitely recommend The Blind Owl, especially for The Neat Aristocrat. I would recommend The Blind Owl.
The Neat Aristocrat. I love this.
By Hadayat. Yeah. The incel too, like basically the character from I was gonna actually write an essay, but I don't have time now because I'm writing my book. But when I do have time, I probably will write an essay on The Blind Owl for Apocalypse Confidential. That basically Hadayat is portraying the incel 2 in a way. Yeah. I mean, oh yeah, Bret Easton Ellis. Do you think Bret Easton Ellis is one of the greatest living writers? He's still alive. He's still pumping out podcasts.
Kind of.
He's still pumping out
We're gonna be
podcasts.
real honest. I think he's hot garbage.
Really?
Like, yeah, like.
But he's brolit. He's like thoroughly brolit.
Yeah, I know. I just like it. Just all fucking slaps me the wrong damn way. I mean, I'm like one of these. I'm like the gendered Southern in ways that cannot ever. Like, I'll look at that. It's kind of like how I watch mafia movies. I'm like, so that's how Yankees act, you know? Like, that's the way I. It's like a Nat Geo documentary for me when I read something like that.
Yeah. Gio, who's your favorite Lusso scribblers? Basically like 40 to 50-year-old neats that wrote like stories in the early 2000s that you could find on like text site erotica chapters. I don't know, there's like a lot of like weirdo stuff. Like, I mean, Richard Burton wrote a lot of like that type of erotica. I actually do enjoy Delicious Tacos. I think like his like because I like, to me, Delicious Tacos is much, if you can like look past like the smut, like the actual sex, I think like if you get at the heart of like the reason that like, for example, the themes of like erotic like threat of reproduction comes up over and over again in Delicious Tacos is because I think like there's a longing for normalcy and there's a longing for fertility that has passed him by. And I think people don't really get that when they read Delicious. They just read it for like, this is a good story about like tawdry affairs, you know, like to make it, you know, to not like go too far for the YouTube thing, but like, no, I think like there's a lot of themes in Delicious Tacos that people don't read into him. And I was trying to get to that back in the Follow the Rules days, but I think like there were too many people on the stream and it was like got too immature and like people want to talk about feminism and I didn't get a chance to like jive with him about like the real heart of his literature.
I have a weird list for my 4.
Oh yeah, come on, throw it up.
Brothers Karamazov. I actually have a William Faulkner novel on here, but it's not his. It's usuals. It's Absalom. Absalom.
Absalom. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
You win. That's my favorite Faulkner novel. Moby Dick, and then the 4th one's always a tough fight, but I usually just slap Blood Meridian on there because it's probably my favorite Western. I grew up with all sorts of stuff. I talked about this with Conscious Caracol earlier this week. It's like our bonus Digital Archipelago episode. It's in the playlist. You can go watch it. But like, I grew up with like a lot of Westerns, like not just movies, but like books and all those like Baumgartner paintings. And so it's just like, and it's very weird because it still has a very pronounced culture even in France, which still has like the most academic and political anti-American streak outside of like, most ardent academic agent fans. And it's just like, there's a chain restaurant called Buffalo Grill, and it's just like peak kitsch American Western stuff. And I'm including with the Baumgartner paintings, horns hung up. It's like take American Western
or like Remington paintings.
Yeah, but take all of that like you would see in a Cracker Barrel and then throw it outside of Paris, France, in the midst of their highway system, and you can go stop and get a steak burger. It's very strange, but it's this neat cultural artifact. But yeah, those are my 4: Absalom, Brothers Karamazov, and the other 2 that I just listed there, with Cormac McCarthy being on number 4, although number 5 sometimes varies because I distinctly like a lot of the Civil War stories at the time as well, but those are more like short novellas and things like that. But I find that war so fascinating because it's just like I'd go to family reunions as a kid and just be like, oh man, because I have family that's done like all this work, like hundreds and hundreds of hours worth of work for genealogy, and that's a very, I think, interesting American thing because like depending on like what kind of class you grew up in, like white lower middle class land workers, like you kind of want to know where you descend from. Like if you know that like somewhere down the line you might descend from something nice, like you can claim that just some tidbit of honor or a story that you can pass along to sort of sell yourself if you moved out west. But like some of us did pretty well for ourselves. Others joined the army and got out of there. Like my dad's side is, Irish immigrants that came over in the 1840s and then fought every war that the USG's been in since the Mexican-American War. My mother's side's been here since the very beginning. It's all interesting stuff, but getting way too off track on Cormac McCarthy and waxing poetic.
Apparently, the Mormons have the biggest genealogy center in Utah for people.
Well, you kind of have to with those families.
I think the last thing Cormac McCarthy would want us to talk about is Cormac McCarthy, and it'll a lot of strange.
Man who never gave an interview hates talking about himself. Who would have guessed?
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention Tool. Ignatius Confederacy of Dunces is one of my favorite works.
Have you ever heard me do my spiel about Confederacy of Dunces?
No, I haven't.
Have you ever heard it, Prude?
No. Like I haven't.
Keep in mind, Ignatius is literally me.
So. Yeah. Okay. I mean, there's some hard Ignatius tendencies in me, and look where I am. Okay. I'm at this very moment recording a lengthy screed against the evils of the century, and the Confederacy of Dunces to me reads. It's it's like Heart of Darkness is for some people. To me, it's like, I mean, it's funny. It's like certainly darkly funny, but to me, whenever I read it, this is the chronicle of a man who is very similar to me in, original circumstances, in philosophical temperament, in profession, in life circumstances, in age, and he's clearly careening down the rails into suicide. So this is a very dark trip into the psyche of my own sort of civic identity as a New Orleanian, so there's an extra added edge on Confederacy of Dunces. I think specifically for people in New Orleans, this wouldn't even go as far as Baton Rouge, it's for us specific, everyone down here, we all know it Ignatius, and I'm the Ignatius that a lot of people know, unfortunately.
What has bred that in that particular era, around NOLA? What happened? Why does it produce this phenotype?
Well, I don't quite know. I don't know. I mean, it's decidedly not American city, and it's a very unserious city, and it's a very criminal city. So it produces a very strange combination, of joie de vivre, murderous violence, Catholic revolt against the future, and and sort of tropical mugginess. A friend of mine, actually, a mutual friend of ours, once told me I should write about New Orleans, and I've tried over and over and over again, and I can't. She can't make.
Now I
make
can
it come out about
understand.
it.
Now I can understand the series Banshee a bit more, as to like why. Yeah, like that's the
Is that
themes are ever present.
Yeah. Is that the recent one about the law family? Like some law firm?
Semi-recent. No. The Banshee's about this guy like pretends to be the town sheriff, the new one, and it's like one of the most like physically graphically violent series that they've come out with in recent years, but it's got like a lot of that element of like, it also has like an element of tech as well, because like one guy, like he's friends with this like gay tech bro that helps him out, and it's like I think like it does have those elements of that particularly like Louisiana phenotype, but it's just caked in like sex and violence everywhere. So anyways, I think we should move over to the supers. I mean, I know Kualango wanted to talk about Suti, if you've read Suti or Sutri by.
I think that's the one I haven't read, but I'm
Mm,
sure somebody may have.
yeah, but I never knew that he also did the whole like Stephen King, a lot of like themes about like weirdo elements of sexuality. But anyways, so should we move on to the supers, boys? I mean, it's getting late. I'm actually quite hungry. So anyways,
I have a date tonight at some point, so we've got to finish up at some point.
Yeah,
all right,
someone's
good.
got to get it tonight.
Oh boy. So anyways, Josh has sent me another super on my PayPal. So if you want to donate directly to PayPal, I have the link down. He said only was getting sneeded part of your plan. Yes, it was. As every week that I have a live stream. So there you go. I mean, let's do the shilling. So next week I will come out with another content minded. I haven't decided if it's going to be Alexander Adams or it's going to be Goran, a GSP from the War Report. And also, like, again, I'm working my book, so I have been lagging on the reviews. And I have like a few important meetings this week, so we'll see what happens. And also, a new update, content update, is that on Tuesday around 7 p.m. British time, but around, I believe, 2 EST, I'm hosting, first in a long time, I'm hosting a Twitter space with Pharaoh and Fen de Villiers. We're going to talk about the new gallery, the exhibition that a bunch of my friends, long time coming, Matthew the Stout has organized, along with Alexander Adams and a bunch of other people from this institute in Britain. And we're going to talk about that. And well, yeah, no more hockey. I mean, the season's done. And by the way, the finals was a travesty, in my opinion. Although I was happy that the Golden Knights basically destroyed the Florida Panthers. That they advanced by, let's say, unsavory means. But I think that
there's a hockey team called the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, they made it to the finals. The Florida Panthers.
Dear God.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 teams in Florida. There's the Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning.
That's a Girardian nightmare.
Why does Florida have hockey teams?
Because of the snowbirds. That's why.
No.
They have 2 hockey teams
where ice is natural.
It's because of Pedro.
I know.
The reason this perversion of nature has occurred is because of Pedro Gonzalez and the Ron DeSantis campaign, who are against both God and civilization.
Yeah, Gary Bettman is against both God and civilization. Yeah, exactly, because of Gary Bettman. Yeah. No, but Vegas won. Actually, Vegas, I got to say, though, even though it's kind of suspicious that they've only been existing for since 2018, and they've won a cup in like less than 6 years. But no, the reason they have apparently Vegas is actually pretty popular. The Golden Knights actually do have a fan base in Vegas, because they managed to promote themselves quite well. And Vegas has managed to become a hockey town for some reason. That's pretty crazy. But anyways, enough about my screen. Hopefully the Maple Leafs, they have to get rid of the big 4, at least one of them, and they have to. I think they should get rid of their coach, but that's just my opinion. I think Sheldon Keefe has been a total failure. When I was a kid, the Maple Leafs they had an amazing team. They had a violent team. They had guys like Ty Domi and Darcy Tucker and Wade Belock and Shane Corson just destroying people on the ice every night. And little Gio going to my tenant's place to watch hockey, my Portuguese tenant, and just like yelling at the screen for Ty Domi to destroy somebody. You imagine like 8, 9, 10-year-old me just screaming at the television when Ty Domi just drops the gloves. But anyways, that is a vision I will not assange you with anymore. No, listen, the Habs are not going to win next year, okay? People have thought the Habs are cooking. The Ottawa Senators, they think that they got a good team. They're probably going to get good picks in the draft, but I don't believe it. Listen, Donald Trump Gaming, I have to say this as a Maple Leaf fan, okay? This is why I hate. So I have to hate the Senators. But anyways, first for $1.99, would you kiss Kissinger, fellas? Would you kiss? I mean, well, you mean the kiss of death? Is that what you're talking about, comfy lad? I gotta say, there's been a lot of base Kissinger takes lately. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that? Why people are memeing base Kissinger? I don't know.
No, it makes sense to me. Kissinger is like the worst person ever. Like you'd be hard pressed to find a person that I dislike more than Henry Kissinger, who's still alive. Like, I mean, this is a guy who's responsible for like all kinds of. He's responsible for nearly all of the things in American foreign policy that guys on our side dislike. So I mean, I really don't understand it. It's like strange incongruence. It's like, oh, he's based. I'm like, he's really not. He's
like the Dark Lord, Tony Blair.
Yeah.
So dark that
you
almost
study him to understand how on earth you got to here. But I mean, again, you have to understand, like, his senior thesis. His whole senior thesis is about Metternich. This is where he got his start. And so what is he trying to do? Was this like weird, like Machiavellian way in which how can I create a concert system with a primary world order being centered around the United States? Spoiler alert, it doesn't really work that way because the rest of the world is not like a bunch of like 19th century Europeans after the defeat of Napoleon, but like, lo and behold, right? But read his work because it's actually well worth your time to kind of understand how he thinks. And world order is interesting. His Metternich stuff is actually probably one of my favorite things of his to read because he's like actually really good historiographer, believe it or not, which is like a very strange thing to consider, but I don't know if I'd give him a kiss.
Look, I'm not saying don't read him. I'm just saying, like, you don't.
He is evil.
So this is a Zoomer thing that I like. You all will like, and I will go right at the Zoomers here. You all will do this thing where
worship power.
Yeah, well, not even worship power. You all have like no pedagogy, like so, like you like read a new book and download the personality. So like it's. Like not every book that's published is a good book,
Yeah, true.
Not everybody that writes a book is based. You can read a book and say, that wasn't very good.
Yeah, exactly. You could read Karl Marx and be like, no, maybe not. But
if only we stopped every Zoomer tanky who read Marx and downloaded that personality, we'd save ourselves a lot of grief.
Apparently, our good friend Amy Therese is in a war with Oz now, so. But she gets into a war with everybody.
Whatever shuts him up. I'm for it.
He called her, and I quote, a drug addicted crack word I can't say on YouTube. But anyways,
if there's one thing of Kissinger that you're going to read, I will just suggest humbly, because I think it's still worth considering in the wake of the alliance trap that we're currently would be 1965, the Troubled Partnership. A reassessment of the Atlantic Alliance or something like that, where he sort of takes a look at whether or not this Atlantic NATO project is worth our time.
Well, that is actually, well, I wanted to read what he said about Spangler, but
you got like 100 pages to read. I mean, it wouldn't be a stream thing. It might be like a solo variety mega show hour for you, but
no, it could be. Yeah. Because I was thinking of doing one on Fish Tank, but I might read about Fish Tank, but so Owen Zaleski sent me a PayPal for I think $6 a minute. Well, the fee it's like $5.79. So thank you, Owen Zaleski, you're a good friend or good patron. I think you're in the Patreon Discord. I have to invite Sandbatch to the Patreon Discord. But anyways, this is a good one for $20. Jacob, our good friend Goober. That's it for $20.
I was like, I'm worth $20 for y'all today because I'm sure he's talking about me.
Oh, maybe he is. I think he's one of your A-logs. So thank you, Jacob.
Wait, hold on. I was just point is this A-log thing. This has been used. This phrase has been used around me as though I don't know what it means. I know what it means.
No, I know you know what it means. the damn A-logs. To quote Ethan Ralph. So dyslexic generator for $2. I love that name, by the way. Dyslexic generator.
That's
for
so
$2.
good.
It's so amazing. Yeah. Gio, are you one of us? Yes, I am one of you. I don't know what it. I mean, do you mean Zoomer or American? I think we were talking about America at that time. So no, I'm
It's
not
Australian
American.
$2.
Oh, okay. I mean, I like Australia. I like a lot of Australian culture. I've watched a staggering amount of Australian daytime television shows. So, I mean, a lot of Canadians have been to Australia. A lot of Canadian, like, there's an affinity. But if you had to like take two countries that are so similar in so many ways, it would be Canada and Australia, demographically, culturally, you name it. So okay, this is 220 by Whiskey Jack. What about Lovecraft and Blood Meridian? Does Lovecraft come up in Blood Meridian? I didn't know that. Interesting.
Like a Lovecraftian influence?
Is there a Lovecraftian influence in Blood Meridian?
I don't think so.
I don't see it.
But I blew my wad whenever I said I don't like H.P. Lovecraft. So I don't see any of that in there. I don't see because with Cormac McCarthy, there's not as much fiction goes into Cormac. He didn't read a lot of fiction. He was remarkably not very well read, and this is what something people said about him. So he's not going to know. I mean, he'd be aware of some of these guys, but he didn't really like them. Like, he liked mathematicians and that sort of thing, and that was something that was true about him his entire life. So like there's there's not as much.
I can't consider what goes on in Blood Meridian to be cosmic,
right?
Like horror. I wouldn't see that. I mean, even if it was, right, like it is so intrinsically infused into like Christianity that it would be far, at least one or two cousins, family members, removed from Lovecraftian.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So Nerve AMV Maker for $10. The Crossing is possibly the best tragedy ever written by an American. The very end of the book is the single most haunting thing I've ever read. Spiritual tragedy at its most devastating. What is The Crossing? It's
his 1994 book.
Is it good?
This is one I have not read.
I haven't read
I know it's considered the follow-up to All the Pretty Horses, but I've only read All the Pretty Horses.
Have you read it, Sandbatch?
Oh no, I haven't actually. Like again, with McCarthy, I'm not the biggest expert. I'm very similar to Cormac McCarthy, but I am not an expert. I am not actually personally.
Maybe I should read The Crossing next. I mean, I want to always read Blood Meridian, but
that's one of the ones I think is more interesting looking, but he has some stuff that just doesn't really look like it interests me that much. I was sort of poisoned because I tried to read The Orchard Keeper and I was like, this isn't very good. And apparently I probably wasn't being fair, and that kind of turned me off some of the other.
I liked it. I've only read passages of it, but I liked it.
Yeah, I came to bury Cormac McCarthy, not to unilaterally praise him. Some of the stuff I don't really like that much.
No characters.
I've never read that one.
So no characters from All the Pretty Horses reappear, but its predecessor, Crossing, is a coming-of-age novel set on the border between southern United States and Mexico. It takes place before and during the Second World War, focuses on the life of protagonist Billy Parham, teenage cowboys. It looks pretty interesting. Is there any romance in Cormac McCarthy or not a lot? There's not. It seems like women are suspiciously absent.
None. Okay, almost none. He's got like essentially one female character that he spent 15 years writing. And it's this woman in Stella Maris, and like even she's really like an autistic woman. She's like a dude trapped in her body. This is the only way I can really describe it. She reminds.
I know a lot of women like this.
There's romance in All the Pretty Horses.
She reminds me of an e-girl, is what she reminds me of in a lot of ways. But And she's actually the one that speaks the passage. She's the character that speaks the passage about Spangler. But then when she refers to her own sexuality, she uses the phrase "girl juice," and I'm like, only a dude would use that word, man.
Yeah,
Like,
only
you blew it.
exactly. No woman would ever contemplate saying that. Unless they've been totally destroyed by prawn or something like that. But anyways,
or they're an e-girl.
Or they're an exactly. Maybe bronze. No. We shouldn't rag on her because apparently Chloe's actually a pretty nice person. But it's just I don't know. For those of you, I was going to refer to Bronze Age Shoddy, but I don't want to cast shade on Bronze Age Shoddy. I heard she's pretty nice, but anyways. 5.
Hey, say that again. Say that word "shawty" again. Say it.
Shoddy?
Say it for me. Say it for me.
Shoddy?
Yeah.
Yeah, boy.
Jeez.
I like the Texan Southerner, like the Alex Jones Southern accent. That's my favorite one. But
That's
also
it.
like
young Alex Jones.
Yeah. But Louisiana has some great accents though, especially the Acadian one.
Yeah. My specific dialect, which whenever I like, if I start drinking or something, it starts sounding like this a little bit more, was voted the easiest to listen to in the entire I can't pronounce French words at all. Of English language dialects. But some people out there, and they're wrong. I'm sorry, you're wrong. East Texas is fine, but mine is the best. I've got the one. I've got the one.
I like the idea that you've had a few drinks on this stream and you're sitting in your car waiting to sober up.
I'm totally sober right now, actually.
It's just how he talks. But anyways, Nerva Maker for $5. Leftists have come out saying his work was dominant critique of Western masculinity. It's pretty funny. No, I mean, Cormac McCarthy, how can you read The Road and not conclude that that's a celebration of a particular sacrificial form of masculinity? I mean, that's incredible. I mean, that's a Talia Lavin take right there, if I've ever seen one. But
the book is dedicated to his son, but okay, lefties.
Do you think his son could be a great writer or no?
He and his son were working together on this like film adaptation shit for Blood Meridian. I don't know what his son's going to do. I mean, he's literally younger than all of us, and that's a weird thing to imagine that this man who died at the age of 89? Had a kid in 1999.
Holy crap! That's that's Hugh
Hefner
level. Yeah,
he pulled, but I mean. Not often, but he pulled. But who knows what John Francis McCarthy will be like? What he's still a young man. He could be anything. But I mean, I think he's
a sensitive young man.
I doubt that. But I mean, he's got the authority of his father's works. I mean, he could be something. He has potential.
He could be like Dominic Mysterio to Rey Mysterio. No, I shouldn't. Apparently, Dominic Mysterio is like the number 1 heel in the WWE right now. But I find that hard to believe because I hate that nerd. I hate that The only okay, here's the thing. You want to know about pro wrestling? The only cases of nepotism in pro wrestling that were really good. I mean, there's a few of them. The Von Erichs, the Poffo family, by which I mean Randy Savage. Of course, the Hart family. And that's pretty much, I mean, there's Japanese examples. There's a lot of only like Mexicans and certain forms of Canadians and certain forms of Texaners can really make nepotism in professional wrestling work. I mean, Mexico, they have their tradition of it. Some masks that luchadors wear have like literally been worn by their family for like 50, 60, 70 years. Maybe some of them 100 years actually. But anyways, but Americans, no, I mean, that's nepotism in pro wrestling, unfortunately, has gone by the wayside. But anyways, that's a long digression that I probably should save if ever go on Academic Agent show again. But for Zhang Y, for $5, I don't mean to blow up his hunting ground, but I'm pretty confident I saw Gio trying to pick up women outside of Lane Brandt. No, listen, implying I ever leave my basement.
I saw that one when it went up live. I had to mute and laugh. That shit is that's a great.
Trying to pick up women outside a plus-sized women's clothing store. Just. Gio is the anti-zero HP Lovecraft.
Yeah, she not only could she not lose weight, she could gain a few pounds. That's a good one, actually. That's a pretty great one. I gotta admit that's a good one. I shouldn't say this on air, but a friend of mine, she actually texted me with that screen cap. Like, she's like, "That's the funniest super chat." I go, "Oh man, it wasn't default friend, it was another woman." So anyways, our good friend Lou Templar for $5. Have any of you read Alice Babylon or watched the 1984 Threads?
We talked about Threads.
We
little
talked
bit.
about Threads, but no,
and I have
haven't
read.
seen
Yeah,
one.
I've read Alas Babylon. It was a long time ago. It was in 9th grade was when I read it, but I have read it.
Alas Babylon. A
Oh,
novel by
It's the
Catherine
one where the nuclear apocalypse happens and people in the southern hemisphere, like in Australia or some shit like that, they have to slowly watch the fallout headed towards them.
Man, that's kind of like The Star by who was that? The fedora tipping fiction. I mean, I know that's not specific saying fedora tipping fiction writer. Clark, he wrote The Star about the Star of Bethlehem destroying
Fedora tipping Clark. He goes into a phone booth and he comes out and he's Superman.
No. He wrote that story about the Star of Bethlehem destroying a planet civilization. And it's like it's supposed to be this like thought-provoking like Reddit thought probe of like the Star of Bethlehem destroyed a civilization, but it gave us the birth of Christ, blah blah blah. So it's like who am I think it was
3D 5 me, bro.
Yeah, 3D 5 me. I had to read that first year philosophy, that short story. So what are your thoughts? So this is for $5 by Scribe8762, our good friend and patron. What are your thoughts on No Country for Old? We skipped No Country for Old Men. I feel like the film's adaptation is what brought McCarthy to most people in our generation. Yeah, that's very true. Anton Chigurh.
I did not watch that movie until 2021.
Really?
Yeah.
The thing about Old Country for Old Men, this is the only thing I'll say about it, is that the film is excellent. It's an excellent film, but it skips a scene that changes the meaning of it entirely. Okay, so you have to read the book to get like this actual meaning. But first of all, the character Ed Tom is the villain of No Country for Old Men. Controversial take that I will not expound upon. And then second of all, however, there's a scene, and the scene that proves that he's the villain is the one that gets removed from the movie, and it's when he goes to talk to the old uncle. You can't stop what's coming. But he goes to talk to this character, and we get this story about how, because Ed Tom's story is he's a decorated World War II veteran, comes back to his hometown, becomes sheriff, and we find out that his whole World War II story is stolen valor, that he was like a coward. Everyone in his unit was killed and he hid under a rock and then crept back to friendly lines, and he was decorated for it. And that's the whole base. So there is like this character that's supposed to be the moral center of this novel. It collapses at the end. Just the center falls out and there's nothing. Emptiness, man is just a brutish animal.
Holy crap!
That's why he's the villain, because he's the only. The reason he's the villain is because he's the villain. He's the only character in No Country for Old Men that has the arrogance to think himself a hero. That's the reason why he's the villain. But that's No Country for Old Men's actually my favorite one.
Oh wow! Yeah. That is a good interpretation of it. That's incredible. So for $5, Parker the Person, the Trinity test site is at White Sands. Los Alamos is a couple hundred miles north.
There we go.
There you go.
My apologies.
That's America in general right there. Texas has really been, like, people think New York, Pennsylvania, Maine, DC. Like, I think like Texas has like, it's sort of like a not
White Sands is in New Mexico, by the way.
It's not. This is New Mexico.
This is New Mexico.
No, but a lot of like fundamental.
J. Otto Pole country here. J. Otto Pole and who's that? That's John David Ebert and Art Bell.
Art Bell. Yeah. There's a lot of UFO activity in New Mexico.
I wonder why.
I wonder why. Okay, so the UFOs are right next to the nukes. This works if you're a conspiracy theorist and if you're not one,
Exactly. If you're like some kind of like Jordan Maxwell, Michael Tsarian, Richard Lane type of conspiracy theorist, then it does work out quite well. If you're like Art Bell broadcasting in the mid-90s.
Wait, Redditor? I am not a Redditor. I have never used Reddit.
Apparently, there's a Reddit exodus right now, but I see. This is why I think Reddit should.
Did you notice how Twitter is kind of preparing for that with their little communities thing?
Yeah.
That, like, if you're a part of a certain like community, you can be a part of this Twitter community thing, and more hyper individualization through like consumer identity. But anyways, yeah,
that's what I mean. I think Reddit should stay up as a containment zone for all of the freaks, but that's my opinion.
Well, from what I saw, like basically Reddit is like they're changing their API or whatever, and like some people are getting upset about this, and like
they're getting rid of karma. What are they doing?
They're getting rid of moderators that have been there for forever. So all these Jannies that have got like their only existence.
The moderator side has come.
It's
Janny. They'd be Janet. There'd be Jannies out on the street.
It's TJD over there, and they were replacing all these power hungry Jannies with other moderators, and so like to open up these communities, so like private niche like fetish communities are like, what do we do now? And it's just like, well, nothing. Apparently, they're all going private. They're all going private, or they're all going back to Twitter. Because it's a disaster.
You're gonna see a lot more sickos on Twitter.
You're gonna have a lot more coal on the timeline. Kids.
A lot more coal. You're gonna have to keep your account locked. Don't say anything controversial. And I don't know. I've seen people. Our good friend JJ got banned again. I don't know what he did. Like when he comes back, we'll have to explain.
JJ the jack off plane will come back as some other onanistic vehicle
That's
combo.
The greatest account name ever.
I know, eh?
It's the best one.
His last account was called The Little Engine That Touched Himself.
And finally, if there's no more, because I have to actually go to bed early today. Paul W. Hall for $1.99. Who sneeds the Sneed Man?
Chuck
sneeds the Sneed Man.
Exactly.
See the child. Chuck see the Sneed Man.
The Sneed Man cometh. Why did I just say that? The Sneed Man. I'm trying to keep up with the chat here. But anyways, final. What do you guys have going for you guys? Like I said, next week I have a Twitter space, and I have other things. What do you guys have coming up?
Well, I'll be streaming on Monday with Orrin McIntyre, and I've got a lengthy foreign policy stream, so it'll be like a streamathon because the payout's on the 21st, so I'm going to be doing this little streamathon to have some extra cash on hand and pocket for the trip next weekend, which is the U.S. Sildings Event Conference. Tickets, I think, are still on sale up until, I think, this coming Wednesday is when they finally stop going. So, I'll be there, Orrin McIntyre, a bunch of others, so 2 streams, one on Orrin's channel Monday, then a lengthy one on mine, starting bright and early, and then I'll be recording a few things, so there'll be some video stuff available while I'm out this weekend for those who can't attend.
And Sandbatch?
I'm going to probably decide next Wednesday at an hour before ticket sales close whether or not I'm going to head out to that event. But it's like super iffy for me because and the content's going to be pretty super iffy for the next couple weeks because I'm going to be traveling quite a bit. I'm going to the high desert out in Taos. Then I'm going to San Francisco, and then I'm going up to Duluth, Minnesota. It's like every normal people, they go to like New York. I'm going to New York, going to Austin, going to Chicago, and I'm like, I'm going to Duluth, Taos, and San Francisco. Yeah.
I want to go to Chicago one day. I mean, I have a lot of friends in Chicago. So.
Chicago gang is my favorite cluster of it's my favorite
posters.
Right-wing community cluster.
Yeah. But and also I think Default's going to be in New York this summer, so she asked me to come down, so I'm like, maybe I'll go to. I always wanted to go to New York City, but
You never been?
I've never been. No.
You should go.
I should. Yeah. I mean, is Kevin Michael Gray streaming again? Someone's in the chat. See you in the next KMG stream, bud.
I love not knowing who these people are.
You know who Kevin Michael Grace is?
Nope. And I'm
the oldest of old Canadian heads. Hopefully I'll have him on Content Minded one day because I'd love to talk to Kevin Michael Grace. But so anyways, that's our final shilling. Next week I'll probably come out with a Content Minded. I'm just in the middle of writing a major chapter for my book. We're gonna have to make things more coherent, which is impossible for me. So thank you all for our late edition of Digital Archipelago. I don't know if we're going to have one next week or the week after because of the Scaldings event.
I'm leaving Friday morning, so we can have one on Thursday.
All right, we'll see. Maybe we'll do Nathan Barley finally.
Yeah.
So, yeah, not that you have time, or maybe you know what? We'll do Nathan Barley when you come back, when you have time to actually watch the series. It's only 6 episodes, but keep saying he will stream again. Yeah, I mean, I hope he does, but Kevin Michael Grace is such a
I'm gonna go
gem.
watch his old content now. Last one
Yeah.
from 10 months ago. Can America no longer count? And this
Yeah.
old Canadian is he sounds like he's just my cup of tea.
He is.
I look
man.
forward to it.
He
Okay,
was
so
part of the original Luke Ford gang, but then he
oh boy.
had a falling out with Luke Ford. So, anyways, enough about e-drama. Thank you all. God bless. Goodbye. Thank you, Christopher Sandbatch. Me and you have to record. Crude can't hog you all to himself. So
I gotta go chase my one-itis.
Yeah, I know, man. I hope it works out, man.
Yeah, it's been 15 years. I'm gonna find some way to fuck it up.
I know what you mean, man. I have had the same one-itis since we were little kids. So, anyways, thank you all to all the Gio cells, Patreon, Prude Subscribe Star, all of our links, all of our shill accounts are on the bottom. Go to my Telegram, please. Subscribe to my Telegram because I always have my little rants there. So thank you all. God bless. Goodbye. Too sweet. And go, yeah. And go to that Twitter space on Tuesday.